Okay, we are live, ladies and gentlemen. Don't ask why I was late. Listen. Just be quiet. Oh, 11:20. No. You're subversive. And I am here. I did not forget about the stream. And we're going to get started. I'm going to start the countdown right now, and I'll see you guys soon. All right? So, silence. I don't want to hear any more dissent. The utter state of the distrust. No, I'm not going to hear it. Not going to hear it. See you guys soon. So true. I'm telling you, BlazeTV nationalism, literally the future of the Republican Party. You cannot stop it. Yo, look, I'm the baby now.
This monument will never be desecrated. These heroes will never be defaced. From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
John, thoughts on BlazeTV nationalism?
Oh, I mean, I've been campaigning that for the better part of 3 years now. Before I even knew Vince, it actually appeared to me in a dream, and I just sort of been trying to like subtly, when they say John Doyle dog whistles, he does, but not in the way they think. It's always about BlazeTV nationalism. They say I'm like a white nationalist. No, I'm a BlazeTV.
Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo as long as we are led by politicians who will not put America first. Then we can be assured that other nations will not treat America with respect, the respect that we deserve. The American people will come first once again.
Millions of Americans sincerely love Donald Trump. They love Donald Trump because no one else loved them. The country they built, the country their ancestors fought for over hundreds of years, has left them to die in their unfashionable little towns, mocked and despised by the sneering half-wits with finance degrees but no actual skills who seem to run everything all of a sudden.
All right, and we are live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the live streams again. I really wasn't all that active during Thanksgiving week. I think you guys can understand. I mean, honestly, I hope you guys also withdrew from politics a little bit. Although I'm going to guess that probably wasn't the case, right? Because everyone has to argue with their uncles, which I guess is just, it's a part of American life now. And, actually, probably you guys were at home. You guys are bored. probably actually watching more political content. So maybe I should have taken that into account. But me, I was genuinely, trying to have a little bit of distance. So, but we are back. Okay, we are back on the regular schedule. I'm gonna be honest. I am absolutely exhausted right now. Okay, it has actually been a long week of traveling and whatnot, what have you. But I promise you, no matter how low energy I was, and people constantly do not want to trust the plan, but I promise you that we would do this stream tonight. And so I could have moved it to tomorrow, but I was like, I promise this. So I'm, as a content creator that actually keeps my promises most of the time. Better ratio than other content creators, maybe perhaps I will say. We're gonna be doing this. All right, we're gonna be doing this. I hope you guys all had a good Thanksgiving, and hope you guys. I mean, I'm really not looking forward to having to go back to regular life and regular school and whatnot. But we vibe. Okay, we survive. So anyways, with that being said, I promise you guys I'll react to this. I don't want to spend too long introducing everything because it's a pretty long debate. I honestly don't know if we're gonna watch it all tonight. Oh, okay. There you go. There you go. You got your 11:28 incident. My camera just miraculously it just fell off. It just absolutely fell off the table here. So I'm gonna have to fix this really quick. Beautiful, lovely. We used to have some type of difficulty, right? It has to happen that way. It just had to happen that way. It was all part of the master plan. It just had to happen. It's a tradition, okay? But okay. We are back now. We are so back. Look at that. Look at that. Plan non-doubters freaking just owned again. It's so true. It's so true. Who knocked it off? It's true. It probably was American Predictions. That guy, I don't know a lot about that guy, but he honestly does seem quite subversive. Okay, so that's probably what it was. I don't know. It's speculation, I'd have to say, and it's true. If we didn't have our incident, it would be the real BlazeTV. But anyways, that being said, this was a debate took place. I actually have not seen this yet. I have not actually watched this yet, but these debates tend to be pretty interesting. We have a tradition of reacting to a lot of the slightly offensive debates, and this is an interesting one. This is John Doyle versus Austin Petersen. Now, to introduce the fighters on both sides, obviously on one hand we have Austin Petersen, who is a big-time libertarian commentator is what he is. I think he's written a few books. He famously ran for the Libertarian presidential nomination. I know he did in 2020. I think he might have in 2016 as well. Not exactly sure, but he's kind of like a popular figure among like libertarian circles and whatnot. And that's who he is, obviously. And on the other side, we have John Doyle. John Doyle has not written any books, although he is the author of many things. Quite notably, he famously authored the 627 incident and a lot of other stuff, right? Big time conservative YouTuber, and so that's essentially what this debate is, okay? And we talk about this a lot, so I think that's why it'd be kind of very interesting to watch this, react to this, and kind of see what the see what the deal is here, okay? So, Ali says, watch this on Rumble. It's censored on YouTube. It's not censored on YouTube for me, which is very interesting. I'm pretty sure it's just cut out of parts. But then if we have parts cut out on YouTube, that means I can't watch it on YouTube either. So we're gonna have to watch the a censored form, which is fine. I think that's fine. We'll be able to get the gist of it. But anyways, let's get right into this. All right, let's get right into this.
Stop. I don't want this. I want to go in on the
And also, okay, this thing is an hour 23 minutes. Okay, I do we have to watch more of that? It's already gonna probably like a 3-hour long stream just reacting to the whole debate, stopping in the middle and stuff. So honestly, you guys can watch the rest. Okay, you guys can watch the rest. To be honest. All right, but let us begin. Hold on. Hold on, I gotta redo the screen share. Give me a second, because it is being a little bit weird. So my bad. All right, now. Oh. Now it should be working. If it will work. There we go.
stop. I don't want this.
I want to go in on the
now
vaccine passport a little bit.
No, but I'm coming to this. I'm coming to this.
Because, and you know that
Yes, I do. That's why.
you're a
I brought it up.
propagandist.
No, but
Because you are. Yes, you are. Because you are appealing
No.
to the framework. Because you're a snake. You're just like on the Gadsden flag. You know that
That's right.
if I can corner him into
Don't
saying
tread.
the vaccine passport, then the audience is going to get mad.
You know, I always say that everything is gay, cringe, and feminist, but obviously not everybody actually is. Certain people on the front lines of the culture war are actually fighting to instill the proper values and
People are
beliefs
saying put it
and the
on
lifestyles that would
1.25
make
speed. The thing is, I haven't seen this before, so I might. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see. I haven't seen this before, so I might actually want to listen as well. And because I'm special needs, I have to stop and actually listen to it. I don't know if that's actually going to be the case. I'm just speculating that might be a possibility that you have not taken into account, unfortunately. So,
make an American not only strong, but independent. Two of those people that have different perspectives and worldviews of actually how to arrive at that point are my guests today, Austin Petersen. So welcome to Slightly Offensive for the first time. So happy to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Elijah. And it's great to meet my partner, John Doyle, who I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah, well, me too. I'm the biggest fan of both of you guys. John Doyle from Heck Off Comedy, welcome back.
Thank you, both of you, for that warm introduction. I'm excited to get into some of this stuff.
You know, it's just really cool to have just talented, rich, amazing men that are good looking on the show,
let's see if
and we can
skip
show the
ahead this a little.
Yes, yeah,
No, I
good
felt
content.
I felt the same way too. I was like,
We don't need the pleasantries. Okay, we don't need the pleasantries. Libertarians don't deserve pleasantries. I don't care if I don't hate Austin Petersen. He's a libertarian. He doesn't deserve it. Don't give it to him.
facial hair that's not.
Be like, I'm very unhappy to have you on the show today. No, it's not great to have you on the show today. You just say the opposite of everything. Bad to have you on the show today. Hope you're having a terrible day. That's a joke. That's a joke.
Bad, but it's not good.
Yeah.
It's like my entire face.
It's like your show.
Yeah, it's like the show.
The point
was
is
like-
to try and reach the age where, like, when you're losing it on your head, you can grow it on your face.
That's true.
Okay, fine. Jeez, you guys are fine. I will do it on 1.25 speed. Jeez, these people. I'm sorry for being retarded. Okay, I'm sorry for being unable, like, wanting to listen to it since I actually unironically have not watched this yet. I'm very sorry. I apologize for that. I apologize for that. I think you guys need to be understanding of my special needs. Okay, seriously. I mean, what's going on here, folks?
And also, too, just make enough money so if you lose on your head, you can get surgery.
Musk.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Have you guys not had the trainings? Have you guys not been to the how to deal with kids with special needs? Clearly you have not. But,
On that
here we
note,
go.
welcome back to Slightly Offensive. It's the best, worst show on BlazeTV, where we always have 8K graphics, confetti of color. We're so excited to give the confetti of color, which is abbreviated COC, right in the face of Austin Petersen.
Okay.
Let's blast that. And on that, your wife, you just got married to Stephanie. Beautiful, amazing, talented woman that married you. I mean, how'd you land that one?
So she found out about me when I ran for president, but when I ran for Senate, she came to Missouri and, like, was like my #1 volunteer, and we were friends. And then
That's how Austin Petersen met his wife. It's freaking. He's running. He was running for president, and this woman is like, "I love you." It's a little sus. That's a little sus. But I'm not gonna judge that. I don't know the woman, but it's a little bit suspect. Okay, it's a little.
after
bit
the Senate
suspect.
race,
I
we
have
went
to
on a
say.
canoe trip, and we went in this little cave.
Read the video
and
makers number
at some
chat.
point in the darkness of the cave, I felt this hand, like, reaching around, and, like,
I don't see. Okay, see, one thing about StreamYard, I don't see when you guys send member chats, it just shows up as a regular thing. So I'm gonna assume this is the members chat, which says Rep does a stream yesterday, mentions VinceDao in his name, and then Rep stream. It's true. I think the lessons, frankly, is you just keep your name out of my mouth. Keep my name, sorry, out of your mouth, because the second you utter it, the stream's over, okay? And I don't care if it's in a positive context, a negative context, a neutral context. Quite frankly, if you bring up my name, if I'm in the live chat, whatever it is, it's just it's over. It's really over for you, in terms of your live stream quality. So it's true. So I'm really kind of in favor of regular speed now too. I mean, people were so adamant about 1.25 speed, and I feel like this honestly makes it a little bit worse to watch. But I will keep it on 1.25 speed until we get to the substantive debate, and then we will slow it down if we feel like it's necessary.
All of a sudden, I felt like this electricity, and it was like we went in the cave as friends, and we came out as something else, and we started dating. And I think my boss asked me, he goes, "Austin, what was the thing that made you realize that you loved her and had to marry her?" And it was when I told her about my.
You're libertarian. You literally don't know what that means. I'm just jousting really, but I wonder what his. I don't know a bunch about. Well, let's see.
My grandmother, who just passed away, made this special recipe of Danish noodles every year for our family, and she and I didn't think anything about it. And later, she found out what the recipe was, made it, and for my entire family. And I was so shocked. I was like, I cannot let this woman go. So I put a ring on it.
Wow, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And the whole cave story sounded kind of kinky, and I was getting turned on a little bit. I'll admit that I really was, and congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Show that finger off. Where
Yeah,
is it?
thank you.
There it is.
So it's rose gold right there because her ring is rose gold and to match her red hair. So.
Austin Petersen says he grew up as I just looked this up. Assuming Wikipedia is correct, that's my accredited source. This is my academic source that I have. He says he grew up as a Christian, though in a 2016 interview with Glenn Beck, Petersen spoke about how the death of his mother changed his religious views. He says, "When I was a young man, my mother died and she was victimized by a pharmacist who diluted her chemotherapy drugs. I lost my faith and never went back." So I was right. I was actually just speculating there, and I was right, which is very sad. Austin, you should come back into the faith. Okay, come back into the faith, but let us continue watching.
That is a nice story. And John still goes to bed alone.
Give me a break. I'm 21. I'll find. Don't worry.
Rad trad conservatives like you
I
should be
reject
married,
that.
You should
I
be married
reject
at
that.
like 18.
That's such a no. That's not true. Like
You should have been married at 9.
No, that is women. Maybe that's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke. I'm trying to be inclusive to our Islamic members of the audience.
Yeah, inshallah, my brother. Anyway, on that note, before we jump in and talk about the actual debate and what we're gonna get into, I got to tell you that there's one thing that we can all agree on is that meat is epic. If you don't like meat, I don't really like you. But if you like meat, I like all types of it. I love. I like steak. I like sausages. Yes, it's okay as a man to like. All right.
Advertisement. Sorry, Elijah. I have to skip. I gotta.
I eat one salmon, then like a year later eat another salmon. What if they're the same?
Okay. All right. We're gonna jump into this discussion, and I like to always jump into this by giving on these conservative TMZ type of intros here of letting the guests just get a quick 30-second to 2-minute explanation in the most simple way possible of what your worldview is. Because a lot of us are totally retarded. I'm one of these people where I don't think I fully understand libertarianism and I don't fully understand conservatism. I just laugh at ugly people. And so really, like, I'm not an intellectual at all. And I really enjoy people like you guys. And so for those that are not in the same boat as me, or even if they're an expert, as someone who's a libertarian, what is libertarianism?
The simplest way to describe it is economic freedom and personal liberty. So if communism places the role of the collective and the state above the individual, then a libertarian republic is a place where the individual is above the state. That the role of government, if it is to exist solely for the purpose of protecting the private property rights of individuals. And that having a system that protects individual rights, when you protect the individual, you're protecting the collective. That you don't get your rights because you're white or black or gay. You get your rights because you're an individual. And my personal view, I think that should apply including to the unborn, right, from that point of conception, continuing on until the point of your natural death. So as a libertarian, I consider myself someone who believes mostly in the primacy of the individual and that protecting individual liberty will protect the liberty of all of us.
Okay, so that's libertarianism. And do have a question on that, though. Does that involve, like, libertarianism that your rights come from God, or is it, like, where do your rights come from?
Well, Jeff...
No, you don't, because he doesn't believe in God. So what God do they come from? He doesn't. I was thinking of saying something, but I feel like we'll kind of just continue reacting. So keep.
Petersen said God or nature's God, right? So he kind of left it open to the possibility that possibly it wasn't what the Christians define as the God of Abraham, right? So you could, in theory, develop a worldview of natural rights that was not dependent on a theistic worldview, right? And I don't have a theistic worldview. I look at our natural rights as something, the more nature's God that that Jefferson had discussed. Because I think the big questions of the universe, I don't know the answers to necessarily, but the things that we have found to be true, I think we can latch onto and we can claim as universals, and we should codify them in the Constitution as we did in the Bill of Rights. There are certain
Okay, now I think I really have something to say, because I feel like the whole, individualism talking point, I feel like John will probably push back on that. I don't know. I haven't seen it. But the one thing I will say is that notice how, and I notice this a lot from libertarians, because especially someone like him who's a libertarian who's trying to run for office, kind of trying to build a coalition, is to sort of say, well, our there we go. We had we just had an 1128 incident. Very much. Hold on. Let us hope this gets repaired in a second. Okay. We should be back now. Am I back now? All right. I think I assume we're back now. Okay. Anyways, as I was saying, you notice how they try to make the coalition, right? They try to make the statement that, well, okay, anyways, as I was saying, sorry. You know what? The Wi-Fi here, okay, it always does that. It works fine. Random minutes of the day, it'll just for like 2 seconds and then come back, which honestly is not a big deal normally, but if you're trying to stream it is incredibly annoying. Okay, anyways, as I was saying before, I keep continuously getting interrupted here, okay? You have a libertarian worldview, libertarian Wi-Fi, it just continues. But as I was saying, and that is true, it is not the Wi-Fi, it is the BlazeTV effect. The issue with trying to say that the truth is kind of universal in the sense is that it's really not, because libertarianism and kind of any strain of libertarian thinking that you will come across is rooted in the worldview that, and this is where this whole notion of individualism comes from. You leave people rationally to their own choices. Human beings will act rationally. Ayn Rand was all about that. Is the flaw is the idea that humans and human nature is inherently good, right? Humans are inherently good. They are inherently good-natured. They are inherently rational. And therefore, if you kind of just protect individual rights and sort of leave human beings to their own devices, they will act rationally and they will kind of just act, in ways that are good and that are rational. The issue is, this is polarly opposed to actually what the worldview of Christianity is. Because if you know basically anything about the Christian religion, one of its core premises is that human nature is inherently wicked. It is inherently sinful, right? It is inherently destructive, okay? And that is something that is basically wound into the Christian religion itself. And so if you're going to build a worldview as a Christian, whatever that worldview is, because I'm not going to explicitly make the case that, like, in terms of certain political affiliations, like, because you are a Christian, you're a fake Christian if you believe this politically that has nothing to do with religion. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to abuse scripture like that. But I am going to say that if you're going to be an honest Christian, any sort of political worldview you're going to build is going to have to start with the fundamental premise that human nature is inherently not just flawed, it's basically inherently evil. And basically human nature left to its own nature will be destructive, right? Will act in sin. You have it, this and that, right? And so obviously, libertarianism, as I just mentioned, is polarly opposed to that. So really, the truth is not universal. It's not a truth that we universally recognize at all, because you're starting from a totally different place, right? As sort of a conservative whose worldview is based on either Christianity, or even if you're secular, but you're kind of with us, frankly, what you believe comes from Christian worldviews and from sort of a Christian view of human nature, versus the atheist, secular, liberal worldview of human nature that, you know, libertarianism is built on. So you can't really say the truth is universal, because it's not. That's something I wanted to point out. So let us kind of continue there, right? But and it's very important, because think about it. If you're trying to structure, okay, here's the society I'm trying to build. You know, I think it's a pretty polarly opposite whether or not you believe human beings naturally, human nature naturally is going to be good or bad. I mean, really thinking about how, if you were to structure your society, this is a pretty important question. It's basically every single rule you're going to write for your society has to take this into account. And so something I wanted to point out, you know, this is frankly why I don't buy the whole conservative libertarian coalition whatsoever. I don't buy fusionism. I don't buy any of it, because, I mean, fundamentally, I would argue that in many ways, libertarianism starts from the same sort of building block of human nature as liberalism does. Libertarianism is in many ways more similar to liberalism than it is conservatism, because both start off of that godless, secular, humanist worldview of a good human nature, whereas conservatives, and especially Western conservatives, who, you know, are built off of, you know, 2 millennia of Christian tradition, start in a polarly opposite place. So something I wanted to point out. Okay.
Certain things that we know for certain, that that life, liberty, and property should be protected, for things like speech and journalism and religion, and the freedom to worship as you please, and the freedom to defend your life and justly acquired property are universal truths and things that we codified in the Constitution. So I don't know if there's a higher power. I don't know if those rights came from God. If I had to guess, I would say probably not, but I'm open to being convinced and changing my mind.
Can I just say one more thing? This is something I'd like to note to a lot of libertarians. I know there's this whole libertarian community on TikTok. They annoy the crap out of me. I don't really engage with them a lot. But one thing I did kind of notice, and this sort of happened like I guess last year or earlier this year sometime, is I saw actually a bunch of them convert to Christianity, and which is good. But I like to point out to you that, you know, and I'm not gonna try to like abuse scripture or whatever to say you're being a fake Christian if you are a libertarian, but I am going to say that, you know, there is sort of this, I would, you know, really there has to be this level of cognitive dissonance, especially considering when I say libertarian TikTok, I'm not talking about like conservatarian people who are just kind of like generic normie cons. No, I'm talking about like hardcore minarchists. Many of them are just straight up anarchists, right? They're just straight up anarchists, but then they say that they're Christian. You know, something important to consider. Your entire worldview. I mean, really, I think anarchy is very, I wouldn't say it's not Christian, but it's very opposed to a Christian worldview, right? But, you know, that's something I'd like to point out. Your philosophy is built off of a view of human nature that comes from atheism, that comes from liberalism. It is polarly opposed to the Christian worldview. Okay, so something I want to point out to you. Now, I know a lot of these people, right, they're the type of Christianity I notice a lot of them subscribe to is sort of like that, you know, very individualistic sort of New Age style Christianity, right? And so I guess it makes sense, but just something I'd like to point out, you know, if you're going to be a hard, and I'm not even saying this is what Austin Petersen is necessarily, I'm saying that this is what a lot of these people on TikTok are. Really, I don't see how you can be this hardcore of a libertarian, you can be this much of an anarchist, you can subscribe to this much to liberal views of human nature and and be a Christian at the same time, okay? I'm not questioning your faith. I'm not saying your faith is fake or whatever. What I'm saying is that I think there's a level of cognitive dissonance between, you know, your religious values, but then in terms of how you actually apply your kind of view towards the world, okay? And I'm not saying that you have to inherently be a theocrat and want, you know, Christian laws all over the place. No, what I'm saying is that, you know, if you are a genuine Christian, you would have a view of human nature that is fundamentally different from all of the philosophies you subscribe to, which again, I don't see how you can make those combine. Something I wanted to point out there.
Enough evidence comes along.
I feel like libertarianism to me sounds like the gays talk about queer. Everyone's a little queer. Like, I feel like we're all a little libertarian in some ways.
Well, yeah,
I feel that a little bit.
You'll find that, yeah. There's
so
a little
I relate
bit of
to a bit of what
libertarianism.
you're saying here.
Sure, yeah, because there's no matter what the issue is, someone will say, well, I don't think the government should be telling people to do this or to do that. Now they might say, well, but I do think that the government should get involved in telling you how to do this or that, right? What's interesting is that you'll find typically that people will have inconsistencies on those views. They'll say, okay, well, you know, I think that when it comes to taking ivermectin, for example, this was something like when I would have Republicans on my show, I would say, you know, we do have people in my city, my hometown, who are going to the store and buying the horse paste and eating the horse paste. You know, what do you think about that? And they will say, well, I believe in that they own their bodies and that they should be able to put into it what they please. And if they want to go down there and do that, that's their right. And I'm like, okay, then how come I can't go and smoke black tar heroin? Well, then all of a sudden it's, no, you don't. The state owns your body a little bit and can tell you what to do a little bit. Now, mind you, I don't recommend that you do that. But the either that fundamental principle applies, that you own your life and your body and should be able to do with it as you please, provided you harm no one else, or it shouldn't apply, right? So the question is
it's not, though. See, libertarians always try to, make this dichotomy, but just the reality of real human societies, and basically any real human society throughout history, recognizes that, there is ultimately just a balance between the individual and a collective, and frankly, every society draws that line differently. Right? You've had societies that are very in favor of the collective. You really have never had a society in human history that is as in favor of the individual as, the libertarians want. I don't know, Somalia or something like that, but, really not, right? But that's exactly it. That's exactly it. There actually can be nuance, And I'm not saying that the talking points he kind of made a caricature of are the best talking points. I don't think they are, and I'm not going to get into too much, non-YouTube friendly, statements here. But that's what I will say about it is, it's really not. Any society has to draw that dividing line somewhere, and that's okay. I mean, that's honestly okay. Because that's how a real human society has to work, A society in itself is a collective. And individuals obviously are individuals, like an individual exists. So ultimately, you're going to have to decide how to structure the society, which is inherently a collective. So,
is the primacy of the individual, right? Do you truly believe in the concept of self-ownership, or does the state have some claim on your life?
Okay, and I'm not going to go into refutation or anything like that right now, but so that's obviously libertarianism. Now you identify, this is like I always say this is like the political pronouns question, like
right.
How do you identify?
Caesar.
Yeah, so you obviously are Catholic, John. You are I would call you a staunch conservative, but maybe I don't have that right. What do you identify as, like, politically, and what is that defined as?
I simply call myself a conservative precisely because I tend to reject this sort of like leftist, like, really getting particular with, gender identity, things like that. I just say conservative, and I would argue that my particular strain of conservatism is the most authentic.
And what is authentic conservatism?
Well, I will explain.
That's a big claim.
But I will back it up. I will say that I agree with basically everything that he just said, and I think there is a very real libertarian to conservative pipeline that exists. I think when people tend to start getting involved in politics, if they're predisposed towards right-wing thought, they kind of start off with this more like neoconservative, George Bush, Mitt Romney type of understanding, and then they're like, wait a minute, no, libertarianism is correct. And what I think tends to happen, at least in my case and in all of my friends' cases, is that they realize that the broader coalition in which libertarianism is operating is not capable of actually cultivating what is necessary to return to that state. So, like, I supported him for president, for example, because I didn't get that impression from him. So I'm not saying you particularly, but like, if you look at,
were you able to vote?
No.
So I guess we all know why you didn't win then.
Right,
because I particularly could not vote.
All my supporters were underage.
Yeah, that is a very interesting thing. So it appears that also too Rosenbaum's supporters, or at least the ones he supported, were underage as well.
Libertarians always having issues with the age of consent.
All right, let's not go there. It's actually a phoebophile.
Yeah, no, but I do want to talk about this because you were saying about this pipeline of libertarian to conservative. So obviously people that don't understand this stuff, believe it or not, the show can educate people. That's one of my promises, is that at least one time in the show someone will learn something new. So I don't understand this. I don't personally like I always feel
this is very true. We were all libertarians at some point. It's true. And I really can't hate too much on that. What I think I can hate on, in a sense, is people that all the way, if you have honestly examined where society has gone, and I'm scrolling right now trying to look to see if I have my old libertarian pictures, okay? But if you can honestly discern where society has gone, and you're honest with yourself, and you're a grown individual, you're a grown intellectual political person, who is genuinely looking at the world around you and not just, parroting the talking points of the 501c3 or whatever you work for. I think it's pretty obvious. And honestly, to give credit to a lot of the sort of mainstream figures that we kind of think are cringe or whatever, I think you're genuinely seeing this, even if it's not, they're not becoming total national conservatives or whatever. You're definitely seeing a lot more conservative figures, even if they're just going whatever way the wind's blowing or whatever it is, embrace a lot more anti-libertarian principles, whether that has to do with private mandates or, control of institutions, regulation of big corporations, stuff like that. I mean, you look at, I don't know if you guys know this, TPUSA, for instance, right? TPUSA now gives out buttons that say, not just, like, they obviously still have their big government sucks pins, but they also, I knew they have big corporations suck now too. It says like big corp sucks or something like that. That's not to say that TPUSA is like totally, on board with everything we believe or whatever, at this point at least. But it is to say, right, that I think genuinely any like honest anything, it can at least sort of move in the right direction, and I think a lot of people are. And so that's why I would honestly say that if at this point you're still a hardcore, unapologetic, anarchist, libertarian, whatever, I really don't think you're being honest with yourself, or I think you're frankly coping in a lot of ways. So
I feel like conservatism and libertarianism are these like two separate segments or sectors of the right wing.
They can be.
But what is
I want to hear
pipeline?
what I want to hear John explain is, why does he feel as if his form of conservatism is the most traditional form?
Well, like if you really broke it down philosophically, it would be what's referred to as like paleo-conservatism. And I think you probably are more of like a paleo-libertarian.
I mean, not really. The thing is that like
reading Hoppe.
Yeah, no, not really. No, I don't jive with that, because the thing is that I have very open-minded social views that don't really fit in with that paleo-conservative. I'm not socially conservative.
Okay.
But because
I'm not socially conservative, but how can you call yourself a conservative? What? Okay. Interesting, right?
Because I am pro-life, people who are paleo-conservative are kind of like, oh yeah, he's kind of one of us, and I'm kind of like, no, I'm not Catholic and I'm not religious and I don't agree with any, I'm just because I don't think that the Christian bakers should have to bake the cake doesn't mean that I agree with his social views. I would start up the gayest cake baking factory right next to him, and we would, I would compete against him in a capitalist economy, right?
Yeah.
But people lump me in with that, but the only reason they do that is because I defend their rights. I defend the rights of people that I disagree with, and when you defend the rights of people that you disagree with, people think you are one of those people.
Right.
And that's one of the biggest sort of fallacies that there is.
So then what is paleoconservatism?
Well, the reason why John would say his version of conservatism is the most traditional is because traditionally in America, people didn't really say that. People didn't really say, in most contexts, would not have said to a lot of things that are just, gross, anti-traditional, liberal social cultural movements, whatever, would not have just simply said, hey, I have an open mind, do whatever you want, And I think that's one of the biggest libertarian misunderstandings of America itself, is sort of the idea that because the Declaration of Independence talks about natural rights and all that, that's just how America's always been. And it just, up until FDR, guys. See, that FDR came and he made the government big and now we're screwed. This libertarian idea that up until FDR, and I guess Andrew Jackson did a little bit of it, and you had a few presidents, but really FDR and then LBJ just killed it. It was I guess Woodrow Wilson and the progressives too. Before all of that, America was just this anarchic libertarian paradise with free love and free everything, and people could do whatever. That's just not how it was. The reality of the situation is the so-called moral majority that libertarians claim to hate was far stronger in old school America than it was today, right? Back then, you did have a very strong Christian moral majority. They were, first of all, very judgmental, right? The so-called nowadays people say, oh, the Christians nowadays are so judgmental, and they're always being the moral. I mean, that was far worse. And, well, I wouldn't say far worse. I would actually say far better, back in the day in this country, right? That's how things used to be. now you have a moral majority. It's just the opposite. You have a secular, atheist, liberal moral majority, but the immoral majority, I should say. But the point stands, right? And it's very important to point that out because, yes, it is true that the size of the government has grown over time, especially fiscally and whatnot. And I don't really like that. Obviously, it's not good to have, a government that's too big and too wasteful, obviously. But it's also important to point out that before, America was not just, it wasn't just one big Woodstock up until FDR got elected. I mean, it really wasn't, And it wasn't just that there was a Christian moral majority in the culture. There was absolutely a Christian moral majority also in the government, okay? Whether you want to talk about, for instance, something like sodomy laws, gay marriage, whatever it is, most of these social norms that libertarians say because we want to enforce them now, we're like communists or whatever, most of the social norms that we're saying government should regulate now, government has traditionally regulated in America, and it was up until basically after World War II and stuff that started to change. And so when we say we are the most traditional conservatives, we absolutely mean that, because what we believe and the way we kind of want America to be governed actually is the most traditional, right? It is the most traditional, especially if you consider yourself a paleo-conservative, pre-World War II conservative, right? It is actually the most traditional. And even in the sense that you could say this means by which you want to use the government is not that traditional, still the ends, right? The ends that we're actually trying to achieve still are the most traditional. So important to know.
Authentic.
Your form.
So literally what happened, if you look at the timeline, is after World War II, there were a bunch of, and leading into, I guess, throughout the...
I just said that. I haven't watched this, by the way. People will now think I have. I have not watched this.
The latter half of the 20th century, there were a bunch of disaffected liberals who were not exactly a fan of how progressive the left was becoming, and they were also not exactly a fan of the anti-war stance. And so they literally
Very true. Bill Kristol's father, Irving Kristol. The guy used to be a hardcore leftist. Few know this.
Traded like right-wing publications and media, and they were the neoconservatives, the
Correct.
new conservatives, and they blacklisted systematically the more old right figures that you talk about. These would be people like Bob Taft from Ohio, or even into figures like Pat Buchanan. Those would be people who I would agree on virtually all the issues, but who lost representation as these sort of like neocons usurped that power.
Brilliant.
So neoconservatives are basically just liberals who are a little bit more hawkish on foreign policy and a little bit less willing to immediately go along with the social trends from the left, but there's always that 10-year delay. Like even now you have the RNC announcing their first Pride Coalition, things like that. So that's why
log cabin Republicans.
Yeah, that's why, which by the way is that term was invented because of this gay myth, literally a gay myth, that Abraham Lincoln was like this closeted homosexual. So when they were trying to pitch the concept of we need like some sort of like Republican gay caucus or something, they were like, well, we're going to write the historiography of the Civil War to be about equality and things like that. And so Abraham Lincoln, and so at first they wanted to call it, I think, the Lincoln Coalition, but there was like something else, so they called it the Log Cabin Republicans because there's this vague connection between...
It's weird we have the Lincoln Project, which is a bunch of pedos.
What is this gay myth of Abraham Lincoln? I thought that was confirmed that he was gay.
What? Okay. I don't think it is confirmed that he was gay. What?
Have only heard it.
I haven't never heard of this. I know.
Me actually thinking a libertarian might say that.
You said the caucus, and that's got cock in it, but I don't know about Abraham Lincoln having cock in him.
No, and this is what's really like.
Was he gay?
No, he was not.
Are you sure?
Hey,
I can't prove it, but this is the problem,
did you ask
Don't
him?
you think that like the whole Civil War was just like this kind of bitch fit that he was having? You know what I mean?
I think it was very feminine.
Him and General Lee were having a rift there.
Exactly.
Don't get me wrong. I do not like Abraham Lincoln, but
Was the Civil War gay?
Yes, it was literally gay. The consequences,
gay rights.
the consequences of the Civil War could be argued
The
to
next
have
Civil
been
War
like
will be though, for sure.
Yeah, it's just like a bunch of gay people
Yeah.
with like rainbow dildos running around.
This is actually, we were talking about masculinity before we started recording. This is one of the problems when if you have generations of men who aren't masculine and sort of convicted in their principles, because in a long enough timeline, if you yield that power to people who are more feminine and more gay, they will humiliate formerly masculine generations of men by rewriting history books to say, oh, Abraham Lincoln was actually gay, or that we now have evidence that like this Viking warrior was actually like transgender. Did you see that recently?
Sort of, but you're mostly wrong. And the reason why you're mostly wrong about that is because the people who created Western civilization, the Greeks, were mostly homosexual and homoerotic, and they saw women as deformed men. They were the very first misogynists, and they didn't like hanging out with women, and they thought women were lesser in society because they thought, and they had sexual relations with men because they saw them as superior
Boys
women.
too. too.
Their understanding of homosexuality, as I understand it, was basically that those relationships between older men and younger men were kind of natural.
What Milo Yiannopoulos got canceled for.
Exactly. But I think it was that their attitudes towards gay relationships.
Can I just say, my view of Western civilization and kind of the rules of Western civilization, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that a lot of, I don't totally reject all Greco-Roman philosophy, obviously. I think it has its place. But this is the only absolute kind of guide for me, okay, in terms of Western. So you cannot simply point to, well, you know, the Greeks were gay, therefore. And it's very interesting because actually there's actually kind of a push in liberal history to separate. I don't know if it's even, I would say it's a liberal push. I've just seen it's a historical perspective that's been thrown out there that Western civilization is actually, the modern Western civilization is actually far more descendant of like the papal states during medieval times than so much the Roman Empire or ancient Greece or whatever. I don't know if I necessarily subscribe to that. I think in many ways it's true. I mean, obviously, you know, there's going to be a degree of both. I don't know specifically if I would say that like I fully subscribe to that. I don't know if I don't like know enough about it, to be honest. But it is just one thing to note, right? Like we continue.
Between like adult men was actually like frowned upon, and it was only those more pederastic, I think is the word, that were like actually like idolized.
Hairless. I think that the Greek culture, once you grew a beard.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. Like freaking the Greeks were gay. You know, it's not gay. You know, it's not gay. This I mean, unironically, yes, Aristotle, Plato, like these figures all have contributed to Western civilization. I'm not gonna pretend like they haven't, but this is the single most influential book in the history of Western civilization. This book, at least the Western civilization that we've known for 1,500 years, it is Christianity that forms the really basis for it, not so much ancient Greece or whatever. You know, obviously. You know, in aesthetics and many other ways, I'm not saying it doesn't have an influence. Of course it does. It does. But, you know, if you're going to, this is an aspect of, you know, I guess Greco-Roman society that actually the West largely rejected. So
beard, it was, I think that's what I read, is that it was either a beard or something. When you started getting facial hair, you were considered like no longer to be desirable, and you were to be a man and be inducted more into like a war society rather than at home taking care of domestic things.
So I think
like that, yeah, it's like what it's called pederasty.
They would have been particularly intolerant of those, and they were, of those relationships between like gay adult men. It was specifically the relationships which were pedophilic in nature between the adult men and the younger men. But in terms of the libertarian to conservative pipeline, I think, like we said, we agree on like basically everything that he outlined.
So
in the beginning.
The Civil War is gay.
True.
Greeks were gay.
Yes.
True, but
Pipeline epic.
Were gay.
Basically, what I think it comes down to is a lot of what the broader libertarian coalition advocates for results in things that are not conducive to achieving the ends which they seek to achieve. For example, like you're socially liberal. So I would make the argument that being socially liberal can lead to basically widespread societal decay. These people are now depressed and they're looking for something to invest themselves into or for a purpose, or even stripping, for example, national identity away through like an open borders policy, which like the mainstream libertarian platform, I believe, is in favor of. If you have this like big coalition of people where the only thing they have in common is that they have nothing in common and they're looking for despair, if you have a media apparatus that is serving as an adjacent propaganda arm to the state.
Going back on what John said earlier, I don't know if I don't think I would say I actually kind of agree in terms of the like kind of worldview of libertarianism, like kind of the basic stuff. Honestly, hold on. Honestly, and we explained this earlier in the stream, but really we want to talk about like, well, the core libertarian tenets, the sort of concept. I really wouldn't say that I actually do subscribe to that, you know. Because I went over it, obviously. I went over how, you know, my sort of view of the world and of human nature comes from a historically Christian standpoint, right? And, you know, the kind of world basis of libertarianism comes from the opposite direction. So, something to point out, you know. And I kind of went over it, so I don't want to make the stream too long by repeating the same thing twice. But, you know, I wouldn't say I kind of agree with kind of the concept or whatever. The core point of it, no, not really. I think maybe there's incorporation to some degree of, you know, some American founding principles that you could argue are like libertarian in nature, I guess. But like overall, do I really say my worldview comes from the same place, sort of the same core ideas of libertarians, and we sort of just disagree on the application? I wouldn't say. I honestly wouldn't say that. I think I don't think my morality or my political ideology or whatever comes from the same sort of foundation as them. I think they actually come from opposite foundations. I understand what John's trying to do. However, right, when this is kind of the way to recruit libertarians into the tent, and that's basically, I mean, honestly, I will be honest and say I use that strategy also all the time with libertarians, where it's like, you know, what you believe makes sense just to concede something, but then you're like, you know, but really in reality, you really kind of, if you want to see your principles fulfilled, here's what you truly have to do, right? Like you have to, in order, if you really want to see it like society, you know, this small government or whatever, then you're going to have to like do certain things to get there that kind of align with us. And so I understand the tactic, but I just wanted to clarify, I just wanted to point that out. I wouldn't actually say my world, I agree with libertarians on the foundational things. Not really. And, you know, maybe we come to a view of human rights that is sort of similar because, you know, mine comes from Christianity, and then, you know, theirs comes from atheism, but we kind of can agree that, you know, basic human rights or whatever, I guess, maybe in some ways. But I wouldn't say that just makes us similar, you know, it's just like, you know, any ideology can have an overlap on something. It doesn't mean they come from the same place or whatever. So I got to change my camera battery while we do this, but here.
State, they can then weaponize that against principles like that because communists don't want everyone to be left alone like you and I might. They would rather have the state come in and facilitate that onto people and impose, like, you know, their narratives and agendas.
The problem, though, with that is that you must always adopt the attitude or the strategy or the techniques of your stated enemy, the communists, in order to fight against what you deem to be the degeneracy.
Right.
So essentially what happens is that that's how you get the Mitt Romney 10 years behind the progressives' attitude, because essentially what the neoconservatives there are doing is they are adopting, you know, socialistic policies. Like that's why you'll see Mitt Romney and others, and Ivanka Trump, and to an extent Donald Trump, progressive Republicans, adopting things like paid family child leave. You'll see Senator Josh Hawley adopting these policy positions. And, you know, yes, some of it is just...
Communism is when paid family leave. Average libertarian talking point. Oh, you want mothers to be able to raise their children? What are you, a communist? It's true. That's not the first libertarian I've heard say that. The constant comparison of paid family leave, socialism, as we all know. Communism is when you can actually raise your family, right? Communism is when societies value the raising of strong moral people over the economic growth. That's what communism really is about, you know. Okay, as usual, right? As usual. But I think also, you know, I think this is one place that we again dissent from libertarians, is that it is not so much the I'd say it's not so much it is actually more important what the ends are than what the means are. Obviously, you know, we're not going to take anti-Christian means to those ends, but it is to say that it matters more. It is not inherent. See, libertarians basically have a view that using any political means of power to get to where you want to get is immoral, right? That's what's wrong. It's not what you're using that power for. It's not what you're trying to achieve with that power that's wrong. It's just using power at all whatsoever, which I think is ridiculous, because if you are to use power in a righteous way to do good, that is literally a good thing, right? And I think that's our view. You know, libertarians basically are just scared of power whatsoever. But, you know, this is precisely why we have a society where we have, you know, leftists and liberals that are crazy and have all the power, and conservatives who are too scared to use whatever power they once had or they have now to do anything about it, which is angering. I think people get the point, but it's very frustrating, because this is what these people will say all the time. You're using power? Doesn't that make you just like the left? No, because we're trying to use power to achieve something that is fundamentally opposite to the left. But, you know, this is what happens when you make your worldview, you know, a worldview not of like, here's what I want my society to look like. Here's how I want people to be in my society. Here's what people I think need to be like to have a strong society. No, my worldview is just based on, well, government. Well, you're using government? No. Like, you know, I think it's very narrow-minded. It's kind of a cope in a way, because you don't want to actually kind of ask tough questions about, you know, what has to be done in society, and you don't want to actually use political power. So but we continue.
Craven vote grabbing. But part of it is, again, because in order for us to compete what they believe, in order to compete with communism, we have to fight communism. And that was what Bill Buckley and the others said. Well, like with Ronald Reagan, the defense spending, when we had the
Oh yeah, William Buckley. Okay, as we know, our conservative role model, folks. But anyways,
nuclear arms race, for example, they said in order for us to destroy communism, we have to have massive government spending on our military in order for us to compete with them and to drive them into bankruptcy. But you either have to believe that communism doesn't work and will fail on its own, of its own accord, and that you don't need to intervene and have a neoconservative foreign policy. As the paleoconservatives I know don't agree with, and that communism will fail on its own, or you adopt again this more libertarian view of foreign policy and a paleoconservative.
Communism will not inherently, just because it's bad, just because it doesn't work, doesn't mean it will inherently fail on its own. I mean, I guess in a sense true, but yeah, fail on it. And I'm not making the case for foreign intervention. I just want to point out why the logic here is terrible, because, fail on its own, yeah, along the way is going to drag about 90 million to 100 million deaths with it. You know what I mean? And it's also important, here you go again, the humanist view of human nature, that humans are good, they're naturally rational, they'll naturally figure it out and do the right thing. Again, I would argue that's kind of where this thinking comes from, right? It's kind of like, well, humans are going to reject communism. It doesn't work. We're rational. No, but we're not rational, actually. Human nature is not good. Human nature is wicked. Again, that's what the sort of Christian right believes. And we believe it's to be true. It is true. But, when you reject the moral foundations of Christianity and go on, enlightenment and post-enlightenment, human nature is good. You kind of end up with that thinking, right?
View of foreign policy. This is where libertarians and paleos coincide when it comes to the foreign policy. That's why a lot of libertarians like Donald Trump, because he had that more paleo-conservative foreign policy of non-intervention, America first, and that is what I believe in. And I think that's why a lot of paleos and conservatives really liked me. But so the question is do you believe that communism is a system that works, that gets more powerful, and that we're going to have to adopt some of the strategies of communism in order to beat communism, or do you believe that communism will fail of its own accord, and that we should be America first and only have policies and a foreign policy that benefits the citizens of the United States?
It's such a great question. The problem, I think.
No, it's not a great question, actually. It doesn't really make any sense. The question was not. It just. What? It's like he jumped around from like a million places at once. Okay. The reason why paleoconservatives are nationalist on foreign policy is actually because we have a view of human nature, and also I would argue of the identity of America too, because I think it's we are Americans. We seek to uphold traditions that are uniquely American, not uniquely American necessarily, but American. And it's sort of the viewpoint that, America's role in the world is not as an empire, but as a nation. We kind of believe that America traditionally has kind of been built up as a nation state more so than an empire. That's kind of its identity. That's kind of, its roots. And I think also, just the practical recognition that societies ought to essentially, and again, because we don't necessarily have this universal. Remember, we brought this up earlier. For us, there's not really a universal way of like, okay, every society has to have this level of individual rights, right? We kind of made I talked about earlier. Every society basically has to draw its line between individualism and collectivism, and some are going to draw it differently. And frankly, even if maybe that's not the ideal one I would want to live with, and in a lot of senses, it's rather okay. Like that's what the people of that society basically decide on. That's basically functionally speaking why we are nationalist on foreign policy and why we don't believe it is kind of our job to be, Team America, world police, or whatever it is. As a matter of fact, really, the sort of libertarian, I guess you could say liberal worldview of that kind of a universal recognition of this degree of individualism or whatever it is, that sort of universalism that like it all has to essentially be this way, which I think just practically speaking, that's not really what societies are like. That's probably, frankly, is what's going to drive, probably, in many ways is going to drive actually a lot more foreign intervention, right? And the reason I bring this up is because it was very interesting. I've been seeing this on Twitter. You now have, and I mean, this is kind of a fringe group, but I would assume it's going to grow out over time. Basically, liberals, again, and I'm talking about now like straight up liberals. Liberals traditionally, of course, are the kind of anti-war side in America, right? Liberals now advocating for essentially foreign intervention because of other countries that don't recognize LGBT rights. And so it's like, we should intervene in these countries to protect homosexual rights or whatever it is. And that's kind of, I think, actually the kind of end result. Like, that's kind of where you're going to start to see things go from libertarianism. So anyways, let us continue. It's a really weird question. Like, we're talking, because really, I think where libertarians and paleoconservatives, at least on paper, most disagree, even if we come to it for different reasons, is actually domestic policy, but he just brings up foreign policy, which is weird.
What we have is that we're not combating communism on an international scale anymore. We're combating it domestically.
Exactly.
And when we talk about the strategies of communism, I think there's a separation to be recognized between, like you mentioned, combating communism by, matching them in like a Cold War arms race versus combating them by wielding power the same way that they wielded against us. So the example I always give on my channel is that 100 years ago, if you were a communist, you couldn't get a job in academia, you couldn't get a job in media, you couldn't do any of that. And so what the left started doing in the 1950s and 60s was advocating sort of this like Trojan horse. Well, we just want free speech. And so the well-meaning conservative man thought, oh, they want free speech. Okay, I agree with that. And then they slowly had their long march through the institutions. And now the tables have virtually inverted to where if you're a right-leaning person, like you can't even say opinions on Twitter. I mean, I'm banned off Twitter. You got a 24-hour lockdown.
But was that McCarthyism then the original cancel culture? What we claim to be against?
I'm against it because they're.
Yes, it was. And I think I actually talked about this too in a video. Actually, I'll let John explain this. I feel like we have the same opinion. Here you go.
Canceling me. I'm not against it in principle. I think cancel culture is good when it's mobilized to cancel things that are bad. I would be totally happy with canceling communists who are working in this country, because to have that experiment where, we can kind of smugly be like, communism doesn't work, told you, would require the complete destruction of our country, which is something I'm not willing to gamble with.
Okay, so you support.
I think one thing I wanted to say, who actually, this might be kind of weird, but who actually has a very good book on this, his new book, is actually Michael Knowles. I think the book in many ways, I actually started reading a little bit of it, and it really didn't like give me anything revolutionary that I didn't already believe. It is a good articulation though, I think. And frankly, I think, I hope every single MAGA boomer out there that's kind of been fed Fox News talking points for, decades or whatever, reads that book and here's the arguments that it has to make. But we've made the same argument before, which is essentially that, the issue with cancel culture is not the fact that societal norms are being enforced in a cultural sense, because the reality situation is that any society is going to have social norms, okay? And whatever it is, right? Even if the culture is just an anti-culture, or the culture is just total chaos and anarchy, which, obviously any culture that's that divided, that lacks so much any degree of like hegemony, that it's just, you have just the libertarian paradise of having a bunch of individuals who have nothing in common just running around or whatever, right? That's obviously going to end badly. Like, we know that's going to end in chaos, revolution, war. But in the sense that any culture or society actually is rather, has something in common for the most part, has some type of majority of something, right? The issue is not that societies enforce those norms. Any culture, and any culture throughout human history, and any culture has to actually, and even if you, in the word, again, here, so notice the cancel culture talking point. We're not even talking about governmental power right now. We're talking about culture, right? We're talking about just the cultural, social enforcement of certain norms, right? Because he's talking about blacklisting of communists from institutions, private institutions, right? It's not that the government is formally saying you cannot have this job if you're a communist. It's about it's just about the culture saying, if we know you're communist, you're not getting hired here, you don't have a chance, right? And so, and notice how libertarians will always, to try to get along with us, they'll often say, well, I agree with you on culture, I just don't think it should be enforced in the government. But then, you kind of bring it up in the culture, and it's like, well, I don't really agree with that either. Isn't that McCarthyism, right? I'm kind of getting back to what I was saying here. The issue then is not that cultures are enforcing norms. That's not the issue with cancel culture, quote unquote, okay? Because any society is going to have to enforce norms, Okay, any society is going to have to, and societies are going to have to dictate what is acceptable and what is unacceptable. It is not I mean, maybe it will be acceptable in 10 years, to be honest, but for as of now, it is not acceptable to walk around and just strip naked and run across the street naked. That's not acceptable. It's not acceptable, at least not yet. Actually, it is in Los Angeles and San Francisco, but it's not acceptable normally to, shoot heroin on the streets. Like, we have norms of what are acceptable and what are not acceptable. Any society has those. Any society is going to have those, and any society is going to have to enforce those. If you run around on the street naked, people are going to have to be like, wait, what the heck is wrong with you? I don't trust you, this and that, right? Like, there's going to have to be enforcement of these things. The issue is not that social norms and social standards, which are necessary and which are good, if they are the correct ones, are being enforced. That is not the issue. That is a good thing. And especially for libertarians who always say, we don't want the government to enforce morality. Well, you're going to have something enforce morality. And frankly, if it's not going to be the government, one would think they would be the biggest advocates for saying the culture has to do it. We have to be very strong in the culture because we're not using the government to enforce the same things we want, right? But of course they're not, because they frankly essentially believe nothing. But the issue, and I keep getting around this, but the issue with cancel culture is not that social norms or social tradition or any, what is acceptable, what is unacceptable is being enforced. The problem is that traditionally in America, the moral majority and the kind of moral foundation, right? Moral majorities are a good thing if they are actually moral. The moral majority was, your kind of traditional Protestant Christian America. That used to be the moral majority of this country. And those were the people that enforcing the norms. Now, basically since World War II, and it's gotten worse and worse, that moral majority is no longer what was traditionally the American moral majority. Now you have a bunch of secular, atheists, liberals, and communists. Now those are the people that are making these social norms and enforcing these social norms. And that is the issue. And that's precisely why we are against cancel culture. Not because we are against the upholding of tradition, the upholding of norms. Those things are good. Those things are necessary to run any type of society. The issue is we have an issue with the people and the ideologies writing the social norms of today, which they did not write back then. Okay? So, no, cancel culture is not bad. Because the societies are holding people accountable for stuff. Cancel culture is bad, number one, because obviously people are getting canceled for things that are frivolous, at least in our eyes, and would have been sort of rather frivolous things at the most to traditional America. But more importantly, it is the fact that the moral standards and the norms by which today's cancel culture, quote unquote, is being enforced by are not our moral standards. They are the opposite of our moral standards, and that's why it's bad. It's not bad because, people, we consider it to be socially unacceptable to be a heroin addict. That's not why it's bad. It's bad because the people who are writing the norms and the new moral majority, or you could say it's a minority, majority, whatever, just the people setting the norms and doing the canceling are, people that want to cancel us. They are after us. They are after traditional America, and they are immoral people. They are an immoral majority, not a moral majority. So
the idea of, for example, like a boycott. Like,
Yes.
let's boycott a business that we don't agree with, right?
Yes.
But do you support using the government to shut down a business if it exhibits, degenerate principles, according to your idea?
It would depend on the degree to which those
So
principles...
my homosexual wedding cake baking shop.
No, I wouldn't do that. But what I would do are things that incentivize, and this is the problem with sort of amoral markets or capitalism for capitalism's sake. I think it incentivizes the commodification of vice, which I think will contribute to that deteriorative state of the country that we talked about earlier. So, like,
what is Thomas Sowell's quote though? He says that if freedom means anything, it means the freedom to do things that other people disagree with.
I reject the concept of freedom for freedom's sake as well. I think that freedom is a means to an end and not an end in itself, which I think would be the distinction between our two worldviews. And this is back to the libertarian pipeline. So basically what happened is I realized, I saw a meme, and the meme was what snapped me out of the libertarian phase.
The powerful memes.
It was, no. It was...
It's like boobs and memes,
Yes.
two things that change a man's course in life.
It was a meme.
Three things,
It was,
technically.
It was Pepe the Frog, and Pepe the Frog...
That's the most Elijah statement I've ever heard Elijah make. It's true. That is the single most Elijah thing ever. I've heard Elijah say a lot of Elijah things. That is the most Elijah thing I've ever heard Elijah say. Factual.
Frog was about to be guillotined by an NPC, and the NPC said, "Any last words?" And Pepe the Frog said, "My principles," and then he got decapitated. And I kind of realized that to assume that we can maintain this power vacuum and cede ground to communists who literally want to genocide us and take over our entire country and destroy it is not an actual like practical strategy. And you have to use power for good and against the people that want to use it
But
for
private
bad.
property and private property rights give you the ability to exist in an order that is devoid of communism. If you own private property, and certainly enough private property, you can isolate yourself away from those kind of people. But you have to instill a system of private property rights so that you.
Wrong, because you own private property within a society. See, this is what people, and maybe you don't think it should be that way, but it is that way. It is that way. And frankly, I do think it should be that way. But, you know, even if you don't think it should be, it is that way. You own private property within a society still. So, you know, your private property still has a relationship to the people around you, you know, and it is especially true. I mean, I know people like to LARP about having a cabin in the woods or whatever, you know, that honestly, that's probably not the worst way to live. But most people, you know, do we really live in our own private property though? You know, in an absolute sense, you know, we own our home or whatever, but, you know, your home is in a crowded neighborhood. It's in a suburb. You live in an apartment with other, you know, they're obviously, your private property obviously has to have this relationship to the rest of society. And so it's not totally immoral or out there to say that, yeah, societies are going to have to kind of set ways in which they view private property, right? And so, and there's going to be nuance in that, you know, and I'm not of the communist view that nobody, you know, imagine we have no possessions. No, I'm for possessions. I'm for people owning things. But I also think that the things that they own evidently are going to have some type of relationship to the society around them because they own those things within the context of a society. So, you know, whether that's taxes, whether that's, you know, certain regulations, whatever it is, those things are going to have to exist. Okay. It's also important to note that in modern America, and honestly, I don't view this as a good thing, but in modern America, most people don't own property, you know, because even if you do have most, you know, apartments that you're on a lease, you don't own that. But even if you know, you have a house, most people who own homes or own land don't like really own that land, right? The bank owns that land. They pay a mortgage to it. Even when they pay it off, you know, they're still beholden to the homeowners association. Like, you know what I'm saying? You know, so, you know, that's also important to point out. And you could say it shouldn't be that way. And honestly, I think there's a strong case to be made for that, but it is that way. And so, but recognizing practically that it is that way, especially now for most people in society, obviously you're going to have to realize, well, you know, considering most people don't actually own property, what is going to have to be the relationship between, you know, property and society, which I think there does have to be one, you know. So
You can divorce yourself so that, because what you're asking for is segregation. Essentially, you don't want to live in a social order that has communists,
right?
But you have to live in a social order that allows the freedom of communists to exist in a society where they can proudly proclaim themselves as communists. They need to be able to have the free speech to proclaim that.
Yeah.
But if you have what you can't allow them to do is to capture the systems of government, centralize power, and to enforce their social order on others. And
I agree with this. Can we stop the denom bashing in the chat, please? Okay, that's not to say I will, you know, I never say, like, obviously we have to debate our differences, but just right now, can we not? Okay, can we not? Because frankly, we agree on, we're basically all on the same team in this debate. Okay, can we be unified, please? Can we please? You know, we all, I'm not talking about the Mormons, by the way, but, you know, Protestants, Orthodox, Catholics, we all agree on the Trinity. We all have the same Bible minus like 7 books. Okay, can we be unified here? Okay, can we have strong Christian unity optics as we approach the atheist people who are, you know, have political worldviews based on atheist liberalism? Can we please? Can we please? Okay.
What we can't do is allow National Socialists to instill their own social order in a way. Because again, what we're really talking about here is the control of the plan, the central plan. That's the definition of socialism is central planning, right? And what we have to do is we have to have a disparate, more confederated type of a republic rather than a strong federated republic, so that we can have experimentation. And I think, yeah, we disagree with freedom for freedom's sake, but I mean, it's really, I think, it's always the problem with conservatism is that it's always trying to solve the problem that we have right now, and it's never looking forward to the invisible hand that is creating the solutions that are coming in the future, such as social media banning and censorship that's coming on. I hear a lot of talk from conservatives about Facebook being a monopoly, but what's funny is that it's what has been revealed lately with the drops that have come from the Wall Street Journal is that Facebook is losing power. They're losing teenagers to TikTok. They're losing teenagers to Snapchat, and all of their competitors.
Oh, really? Really? Are they losing power over society? Oh, they're losing it to TikTok? Oh, you mean the one the boomers always are like, ran by the Chinese Communist Party, but no, they actually have a point. Losing it to TikTok, a place where conservatives are even more censored than they are on Facebook. Losing it to YouTube, to Twitter. Yeah, how do conservatives do on? So let me just say the problem with Facebook is not just that it's a monopoly. Like obviously that's a talking point. Yeah, I do want to break up Facebook. I do want to break up a lot of these big tech companies, but that's not the core problem with them. That's just, I mean, in an economic sense, maybe whatever. But the real core problem with Facebook, with the big tech companies, is not that they are monopolies or not monopolies. It's the fact that they're censoring conservative speech. They're censoring Christian, conservative, traditional right-wing speech. That's the problem. That's the problem. And that's not going to change because they're moving from one Silicon Valley company to another. The issue still is that Silicon Valley is ran by leftists, and those leftists are using their platforms, which are very important, which are vitally important to public discourse, to, censor, not just push kind of their own ideology, but also actively censor our own ideology. But, libertarians be like, well, because Facebook not a monopoly, that means it's not a problem. Oh, yeah? Or even if you want to call big tech an oligopoly instead, right, of multiple monopolies, they're all the same. They're all just as bad as one another, And look, Odyssey, Gab, Parler, Getter, those are good apps. I like that they exist. We're working on them. We're on Odyssey. We are on Odyssey. We're on Telegram, okay? But we all know that they don't have the same reach and the same power, and they frankly, unless something really rapidly changes, probably will never have the same reach as the big tech companies. And so, yes, it is a monopoly, or you want to say it's an oligopoly if you want to get semantic about it, because TikTok and Instagram Reels are different, okay? But the political scene is the same, okay? It's still on either one. You'll get political speech censored, even if the market competition makes them more efficient and the loading time faster and better algorithm because of market competition. Okay, that's not really the problem here. The problem here is not that the algorithm is not addictive enough. Okay, the problem is that we are getting censored by those algorithms. So
5 to 10 years from now, the regulations that Senator Hawley or others or paleoconservatives would like to see on social media will be irrelevant. And then when the Democrats control the government, they'll use it to control networks like the Blaze, and they'll use those. They'll say, "Oh, well, there's too much power that's being inserted because the Blaze wants to buy another network here or there." We'll say, "No, let's use the antitrust."
Okay, well, I would say Austin has a point in that I think the whole break up big tech line is a cope. Again, I think it should happen. But the idea that it's going to fix the problem, the core problem, which is social media censorship, right? That's not going to fix it. You can break up Facebook you can break up a Silicon Valley company into smaller Silicon Valley companies. There's still going to be Silicon Valley companies run by far left people. Okay, so I will say that. I will say the whole sort of talking point is a little bit of a cope in that sense, but it is also kind of a straw man away from what we're really saying, because he's like, oh, well, Facebook's not going to be a monopoly, so if you break, well, I'm not arguing, John Doyle is not arguing that the solution of big tech is to break up Facebook. We're arguing that the solution is, mandate the protection of First Amendment free speech on social media, And we have to do that because, obviously even if you want to make the argument that, well, wouldn't it be good if it was in our favor? Well, we don't have the institutional power, so for now that's going to have to be the solution, right? But that's what we're calling for, not just trust busting or whatever, They always, honestly, people on both sides try to boil down the populist right, non-populist right. Both try to boil down our ideology to just means of economics, which is just an economic principle. It's our ideology is much more than a bunch of Teddy Roosevelt LARPers, but it happens. I guess you can clearly see people on both sides try to simplify our ideology down to trust busting and protectionism. It's not all there is to what we believe. I think those are just reflections of things we believe. Those are just implementations of deeper things that we believe.
Trust laws that the Teddy Roosevelt Republicans passed to prevent Glenn Beck and Elijah Schaffer.
Are there any objective reasons to not like anime? Number one, hentai. Number two, I've heard people try to make the argument that like anime is masculine. No, have you seen the way they draw faces in anime? Okay, the way the absolute low T faces they draw. Okay, if it weren't for anime eyes, honestly, I don't think I would hate it so much. But because anime eyes are drawn the way they are, I think that's inherently feminine. Okay, and it's very emasculating the way they do it, and it's very cringe, and it's often very sexualized. So.
From capturing another radio station.
Honestly, that's probably why I would say I don't really associate like Dragon Ball Z and Naruto, which I still didn't watch growing up, but I don't really associate it as strongly with like animes, because you notice how Dragon Ball Z is drawn, and he's not really like, they don't have the anime eyes, those soft, feminine, like childish looking anime eyes that, you know, are just gross most of us out. You know, they have kind of more traditional cartoon eyes. Honestly, the way the faces are drawn in anime, frankly, is pretty. It's honestly a pretty big chunk of why we are anti-anime, but nobody wants to take this into account. You know, they're just like, well, would the anime character have muscles, therefore masculine? Yeah, have you seen the face? So.
Station or taking, and they do that. That happens. It happened in Missouri with the network that I have right now, where the attorney general used antitrust laws to stop my bosses from purchasing other radio networks. So you have to be very careful, because when you use the power of government, when you create a new government power, you have to imagine that your enemies will use it in the future, and that technology will change the circumstances as well.
So the first thing I want to touch on is, you mentioned like private property and being able to retreat away from that type of society. I think that almost presupposes that they would allow for that to happen, because the central system has been created. Like, look at Ruby Ridge, for example, or any of these situations, or even like in the USSR, there were people in like rural territories who wanted to basically be left alone, and they were like genocided. I think that especially us as public figures, if this were ever to happen, like our names would be first on the list, and there is no being left alone at that point. In terms of the kind of slippery slope creation of, you know, certain power, which will then be wielded against you, I think that the slope presupposes an angle, right? So like, it's not so much a slippery slope that can kind of go towards the right or towards the left. It can get more right wing or more left wing. And so I think that because of what's happened in the last 60 years in this country, the Democrats are maybe
Very
one or
true.
two cycles away from consolidating basically a one-party state. You know, if they give amnesty and citizenship to people who can then vote, and just demographically speaking, like Republicans would never win another federal election again, things like that. So I don't know.
But is there a speed bump? And I think that you'll probably guess what it is when I start to give you more clues to it. Is there something that is unique about the United States, within the borders of the United States, that exists like nowhere else in the world, that would prevent that kind of total consolidation of power, that would protect our rights more than anything?
Yes. However,
what is it?
It's the Second Amendment.
That's damn right. It's the Second Amendment.
I think the Second Amendment is
60% of all private gun ownership are in the hands of American citizens.
Right.
Because that is.
Yeah, America. Is this like by the way, let me be clear, I'm not advocating for the use of violence, but you know, in many ways the Second Amendment is very often used as a cope, because you know, it's always used as this fake line in the sand, like, well, see, the reason we're not gonna be totally authoritarian, even though we're very authoritarian, is because we have the Second Amendment, you know, and people are not gonna accept that. But I mean, the reality of the situation, I saw a very good tweet on Twitter today. I forgot who retweeted it, but some conservative figure tweeted out, the Second Amendment is the reason why we are not like Australia. And someone quote tweeted that and said, if we did become Australia, the Second Amendment, like, nobody would actually use the Second Amendment still. Which is a very good point, right? So they wouldn't. That's a very. It was. I was like, that is a brilliant take. It's so true. But frankly, the Second Amendment, in many ways, and I'm obviously in support of the Second Amendment, but in many ways, the sort of, we're gonna use it to resist tyranny, the Second Amendment's the reason why we don't have tyranny talking point, it is frankly one of the biggest copes. And frankly, I would argue one of the biggest excuses used by conservatives to not actually ever wield political power or kind of realize necessary things. And I'm not talking about violence, but necessary political ends that have to actually be, you know, enacted. So
is the ultimate bulwark against tyranny. I think it's even more than a speed bump. And again, when the police stand down, right? And my concern with conservatism has always been that it has a little bit too much trust in when you talk about authority in the police, that police will be on their side, and the thin blue line aren't going to be the people who are going to come and take your.
No, untrue. We're actually we're actually not, big time back the blue type of people, right? I think we understand that weird way in which we agree with the libertarians, but I'm for law enforcement. I'm for the existence. I'm not anti-existence of police or even anti-existence, strong police, but I'm in recognition that the regime in power, the state, is controlled by leftists, controlled by communists who want, ultimately their end goal is sort of the eradication of, our ideas. And, obviously when push comes to shove, law enforcement, and in many ways already is going to be used as, an ends to achieve that, right? They're going to, ultimately law enforcement is an enforcer of the state. Obviously a state needs an enforcer, but when you understand that the state, is not our friend, not on our side, this particular state, not like libertarians say, well, the existence of the state, no, the particular state we have right now, obviously we understand that our relationship with the police really shouldn't be one of undying loyalty, because, the cops are not really exactly undyingly loyal to us now, are they? So
guns away.
We agree with that.
Right. But ultimately, that last stand against tyranny will come in the form of the Second Amendment.
I reject that it will come, I think. I think the Second Amendment is basically a psyop in that it was written with good intentions. However, I think it now in the modern context kind of confuses explicit versus implied force or power. So I think that it would be a greater advantage for the states to allow us to keep our AR-15s, because it gives us that sort of, we have that safety switch in case anything ever happens. I can pop off. But it's like, I don't think that'll ever actually happen. And if it will happen, at what point? I mean, if the founding fathers came back.
What about the Bundy Ranch? What about the standoff of the Bundy Ranch when the feds, the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, showed up, and they had rifles behind every blade of grass. They were pointed their guns at the feds, and what did the feds do? They backed off. That implied threat of force did work.
Yeah, in that particular case, though. But like, look at the last 2 years of American history. I mean, we have never, on the face of the world, with maybe a handful of exceptions in the 20th century, seen such a great display of tyranny.
And honestly, I think I would argue that if that happened today, I don't think it would exactly go down. I mean, personal opinion, obviously, but do you think if that happened today, that it would end like that? Do you think if the feds did that today, they would kind of tolerate that, especially understanding that this is some type of like right-wing landowning person? I don't think that would be the case. I don't think it would.
And we had all the guns and nobody did anything about it. And I think that is because the American man has become so demoralized and stripped of identity because of the consequences of liberalism and maybe libertarian thought infiltrating what used to be conservatism, has pacified him such that the only thing he really cares about is the fact that he has his Second Amendment. And that's kind of like his coping mechanism for like, well, one day I'm going to clear my neighborhood of the ATF. And it's like, maybe, but they don't even have a problem with killing you. They would kill you and raise the flag over your house, just like they did in Waco or Ruby Ridge, and they would think it's a victory.
Yeah, and obviously as we're listening to this and we continue to go on, whether you're in your car or you're running, or a lot of you told me you like to listen to the show while you're exercising, you obviously need headphones to listen to this podcast in the best quality ever. How else are you going to listen to my Valley Girl voice and these epic dudes talking about things that most of us don't understand unless you have a pair of Raycon headphones? Now, Raycons obviously are amazing. Check it out. Pick up a pair for yourself and a friend, and that's amazing. So
well, I got one more point that I wanted to get his thoughts on that. So with like the competing ideologies of the 20th century, liberal democracy because we crushed fascism, and communism, as we talked about, imploded on itself like a collapsing star. So it was sort of thought that liberal democracy was the final form of government, as articulated by Francis Fukuyama. I think he wrote that book, The Last History of the Last Man or something. And so I think that for a liberal democratic, nominally state to maintain that power, it can't be seen persecuting its political opposition as explicitly as was done in Nazi Germany or in Soviet Russia. So as articulated by people like Sam Francis in the 1990s, we'd have this concept of like anarcho-tyranny. So maybe the state wouldn't be going door knocking and taking guns, but it would allow for the forces who exist as like paramilitary wings of the state, be that Black Lives Matter or Antifa, to mobilize against the political opposition, and they just completely stand down, whether that's the FBI not even tracking their violence, or in Portland, they've ceded ground completely to allow Antifa types to beat up anybody who's to the right of Hillary Clinton. And then if somebody actually defends themselves against that using the Second Amendment rights and our God-given right to self-defense, then you see that state power actually come down against them, like with Kyle Rittenhouse and what's happening right now.
What's the question?
So I guess the question would be,
do I think that's that we are in the final form of government?
No, I guess it would be, do you acknowledge, or what would your prescription to that problem be, as opposed to the sort of framework that we've been in for the last few decades, where we always view the government as going to be the problem in terms of, like, going door to door and confiscating guns directly, and that's going to be to stand against tyranny, as opposed to a more frog in the pan kind of professional tyranny where you have to defend yourself against the mob.
Have you ever? Well, the mob is one thing, but I think the iteration that I think conservatives complain about the most in modern day are corporations. They'll say, Amazon, for example, or BlackRock, is buying up homes and setting up the value of the housing market to such to where, individual purchasers can't get it, right? And, I'm sure you would probably agree with me that most of these big corporations get handouts from government. For example, in our small town during the pandemic, when they were deciding which businesses were essential and which weren't, they shut down all the mom and pop businesses and they allowed Walmart to continue to operate.
Yeah, that made me I have to pause you there for a second, because that made me so angry, seeing this weird, like almost fascistic, capitalist, communist mix where like businesses were shut down, but the businesses that were probably the most likely to spread COVID were still allowed to remain open. And then the government like giving priority to certain companies, telling people who were essential and who was not. I don't even know what that's called.
Well, that is fascism.
It was really
this
weird.
Concept of corporatism, right? And if you study like the rise to power of National Socialism in Germany at the turn of the 20th century, what you'll see is that that the definition of terms is one of the things that the National Socialists would use as a weapon in order to change people's perception of what it was that they were doing. So, for example, there was an airplane manufacturing company by the name of Junkers Airplane Manufacturing Company, and they were a private firm. And the government took over the Junkers aircraft company, and what they called it was privatization. Right, but what were they really doing? They were nationalizing. They were socializing, right? And in many ways, what we're doing is we are nationalizing these companies, and it's this concept of too big to fail, for example, or picking the winners and the losers, right? So, for example, during the 2007 financial crisis, you had them bailing out Lehman Brothers and allowing Bear Stearns to fail, and what was the difference between Lehman and Bear Stearns? They were both underwater and they were bankrupt. They weren't able to pay their bills. But with Lehman Brothers, you had the revolving door with the government, right? And you had regulatory capture, essentially this concept of people who write the bill for Obamacare.
Okay, okay, whatever. See, the issue with obviously it is, government handouts are an issue with corporations. Not that necessarily I oppose ever giving any big company any type of government aid or money. I wouldn't say that's something I believe in, but I definitely, obviously I definitely think there's a corrupt interest in politics, right? A lot of corporations are able to pick the winners and losers of economies, but I would also say that's not the only issue there is with corporations. See, libertarians always try to say, we don't like corporate America either because they take government handouts. It's like, okay, well, if you stripped all government handouts tomorrow, it wouldn't change the fact that Facebook censors conservative speech. It wouldn't change the fact that corporations, outsource their manufacturing, their labor, and their wealth through other countries. It wouldn't change the fact that corporations are selling vice through the means of endless consumerism down the throats of Americans. It wouldn't change the fact that corporations are hollowing out and destroying in many ways the moral fabric of the American nation, right? They would not change any of these things. It would be nice if our taxpayer dollars could stop funding corrupt Zuckerberg or whoever they're giving money to. It'd be nice if our taxpayer dollars didn't go to, a monopoly like Amazon or something. But it's not the only issue with Amazon, and they always try to, well, we agree. No, but when it comes to really, I would argue the bigger issue is not necessarily that taxpayer dollars are going to. It's really what the corporations are doing. I would argue that's the bigger issue. Like, the big problem I have with corporations is not just that government is funding them. Obviously, I have an issue that I disagree with all these things they do. I don't like them. I think they're immoral, and the government is funding them. Obviously, that's bad. But the real core problem is the actions and the natures of these corporations. And that will not get better just because the government stops funding them. I think in many ways it'd probably get worse. But regardless, I think you would still definitely have, I think, the single biggest problem that we have with corporate America, or I would say there's probably a few big ones, but the destruction and the censoring of conservative speech on big tech, and not even just in big tech, a lot of in corporate America, in corporate workplaces, it's the same exact thing. I think there's probably a lot of companies in America that will blacklist you and not employ you, not promote you, and maybe even fire you if you're a conservative, this and that. So obviously that's one. The selling of vice, the consumerist sort of means of getting the population addicted to sin and addicted to vice, and then using that to sell them more and more of it because they're addicted, and basically create lifelong customers of people who are addicted to viceful things. You know, I would say that's probably the biggest problem with corporate America. That's the biggest way in which we need to rein them in. Obviously, also the hollowing out of the soul of America, you know, things like that. And those things are not going to change whether or not you give government handouts to them. You know, those are going to have to fix those things are actually going to have one of two things. Either number one, you're going to have a very long march through corporate America over the course of like decades. Okay, we don't have time for that. So really, number two, you know, what we're going to need is actual government regulation in our favor of these corporations. The exact opposite of what libertarians want. You know, this libertarian idea. If you just stop giving the government money, I mean, the corporations money, you're going to fix the core problem with the way the corporations in America act today. You're not, though. You're not, though.
Will go and work for the government, and they were working for, you know, they were the head of Pfizer at some time. And that is fascism, right? When you have crony, I don't like to call it crony capitalism because it's not capitalism, because capitalism is a separation of government and state, right? The idea that you can avoid the government and the state, that's what true capitalism means. But cronyism, as we call it, that is the true concept of fascism. And that is what kind of separates national.
By the way, did I show you hold on. I have to text back David Carlson. It's there. Okay. Anyways, by the way, I promised I would show this. I was looking on my phone. Look at this. Look at Libertarian Vince. Hold on. Maybe let me actually get rid of this for a second so you can look at Libertarian Vince. Look at me. This was 2019. This was 2019. I discovered like libertarianism. I thought it was so cool when I was like, oh, look at my "Don't Tread on Me" flag. I had this. I remember you guys. I don't think anyone knows this. But my old setup, actually, it was in the office room back home in California, and it had the Gadsden flag on one side. It had a "Come and Take It" flag. With a rifle on the other side. And I thought I was so cool for that. I thought I was just incredibly based, but there you go. Here's me thinking I'm so tough. Look at me, I'm next to the Gadsden flag. I'm so cool. I'm immaculate. No. Cringe. But we've all been there. It's interesting. It's funny, right? It's funny. Look at that. Cringe flag. It's so true. It is a cringe flag. I have a thread on Twitter. We've talked about this a little bit, but I have a thread on Twitter about why the Gadsden flag, even in its, like, I've seen people say that, like, well, the Gadsden flag isn't actually a bad thing. We just need to reclaim it. But honestly, maybe this is a hot take. Maybe you're disagreeing with the founding of America. No, I'm just saying as a symbol, you know. And let me just say, obviously the non-Christians are gonna be like, you're just Bible thumping again, Vince. But no, like we've been over. I think there's something to be said that America and the West is built off of Christian moral foundations, and so even from a secular standpoint, in order to maintain a healthy society in the West, we have to actually, you know, keep those. And I mean, you've read Genesis, I hope, probably, maybe, you know the story. The serpent in Christianity is not a good thing. Okay, the serpent was the original deceiver of Eve in the Garden of Eden, that was Satan. We also find out later that, you know, the Satan was the serpent in that garden. That was the original deceiver of the world. Okay, and it is not kind of the only sort of anti-serpent take in Christianity, right? We frequently see throughout the Bible the connotation of you know, a serpent is not a good thing. Serpents are meant to represent evil. After the serpent deceives Eve, and, you know, Adam obviously, but, you know, deceives Eve, God says to the serpent and says to Eve that now you two will be like, that the serpent now will be the enemy of mankind, right? The mankind and the serpent will be enemies of one another. You know, they will bite your children. You will step on them, right? So mankind, the serpent is our enemy, okay? Let me just say that. Symbolically speaking, in Christianity and Christian tradition, a snake is not a positive symbol, okay? Literally, the serpent in Genesis represents Satan, and practically, like in actual, I'm not saying every snake you see is Satan, but practically, God also tells us after, you know, the incident, after the serpent did a little bit of trolling, you know, in that garden, also tells us that now the serpent and mankind are enemies of one another. And, in many ways, I would argue it's actually kind of, so that's all to say, I'm not a fan of making snakes our symbols, really, overall, generally. It's not to say that the Gadsden flag doesn't look cool. Join or die is kind of cool. But I think if we are to build our movement, I don't think our movement, I don't want to reclaim the Gadsden flag. I don't think our movement should be using serpent snake imagery whatsoever. We should be all about, Luke 10:19. We should all be our message should be, we trample on serpents, okay? We trample on snakes. We step on snakes. That's what we do, okay? Do tread? No. I'm actually, and I think there's always been sort of that thing, like, we will tread, but yes, we will. But I think that should actually be the imagery of our movement, okay? The Gadsden flag, and it's kind of fitting in a way. That's the symbol of libertarianism. The serpent, the enemy of mankind, the original deceiver of the world. The deceiver of the world. That is the symbol of the libertarian movement. I'm not saying they're all Satanists, obviously, but it's just it's irony. I don't know if it's irony. I think it's fitting. It's probably the opposite of irony. It's just fitting. It's very fitting. So that's what I would say. Okay, that's what I would say. And I talked about this on Twitter. I'll probably bring this up again because I find the Gadsden flag to be just. I'm not a fan of it, okay? And maybe I'm just confirming that because I wasn't a fan of it before. Now, you read the Bible and you're almost like, oh, this snake is even, I know why I didn't like that snake. But it's true though. I'm not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of it. We should unironically cancel the Gadsden flag. It'll own the libertarians, and it'll move the right toward better imagery that I think is more fitting for us at the same time. It's kind of epic.
Socialism or fascism.
Let me actually.
Communism, to a degree, in the sense that instead of like with communism, you'd have like a government-run car manufacturing company, and the people who manufacture the cars are state employees. You would have the direction of production of the cars being done by a government official, but the people who work there are not government employees. And that's, it's like, it's a difference, but it's like a distinction without a difference to it.
So fascism is bad?
Fascism is bad, right? But it's all forms of socialism. National socialism, democratic socialism, Marxist socialism, it's all central planning, and that's what we want to avoid. And my fear is that with the ideology that John is espousing, is that it becomes more and more that idea of central control, that we need to have central control and central planning, because
Yep, the average libertarian, you want to use power? What are you, socialist? Okay, really quickly, I've shared this verse before. I think you guys know it, but I like reading this as a reminder to the kind of recognition that using serpentry and snakes in your imagery is kind of cringe. Luke 10:19, behold, I have given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you. Okay. I think that frankly should be our stance. Not that we are the serpents, that we are, as stated in Luke 10:19, the treaders of the serpents. Isn't that epic? I think that's epic.
People are too stupid to know what to do with their own freedoms.
True.
But I think that if anything, the pandemic, more than anything, and a lot of writers who are paleo-conservatives and who are more populist and MAGA types, have written in the pages of the National Review as such. Michael Brendan Doherty is a good example of that, who's not a libertarian, has said that if anything, the pandemic has chastened their view of attacking libertarians and libertarianism, because the failures of the FDA and of the CDC at the beginning of the pandemic has proven that the government is incapable of managing an economy and managing public health. To me, the best argument for libertarianism should be the existence of Dr. Anthony Fauci. And the best argument for libertarianism should have been that the FDA's regulations at the beginning of the pandemic were preventing us from creating successful tests, and that in an anarchic way and in a libertarian way, private companies and private individuals in the science.
Okay, well, the best case for authoritarianism is that corporate America wants to mutilate your children's genitals. Okay? Which one is stronger? Oh, the market principle. I mean, the FDA created an ineffective okay. Just saying. Just saying.
World, we're creating laboratory tests defying the law as it was written.
If that's the best argument there is for libertarianism, it's it's not a very, it's not, oh, well, the FDA is inefficient. Yeah, I agree with that, but that's your grand case for libertarianism. The single best case for libertarianism. The FDA was inefficient. Okay. I'm not really like blown away by that. You know what I mean? I'm really like.
And obeying the natural law and doing what they would do to help each other, because I ultimately believe, and I think this is probably another difference here, that people are good and that when left to their own devices, they will do the right thing, especially when we're in a crisis, including.
Did you hear that? Did we hear that, folks? Did we hear that, folks? I told you. What did I say earlier in the stream? If you're watching on replay, go back. But earlier, what did I talk about? This is why us and libertarians literally, we try to say we're just kind of two sides of the same coin. No, we're not. This is why we are not similar. This is why we're not similar. Because the traditional Christian view of human nature, which is not just as Christians, but also as Westerners, because as we tried to make the case, this is kind of where the moral foundation of our society comes from, is the stance is it's very central to Christianity. And very central to at least Western conservatism is the stance that human nature inherently is not good, right? Human nature is inherently wicked, right? Human nature is inherently bad. And that's very and again, here's what you have. And I'm not disagreeing on the policy of lockdowns, but this is why, I think in many ways you can kind of co-opt them. You can kind of like psyop them into saying, well, actually it's the true extension of libertarian principles. But in many ways, unless they kind of change that fundamental view, that foundational view, they're never really going to reach the same conclusions that we do. Because if you're starting from a totally different place, there might be some overlap, but ultimately I think you're going to reach very different conclusions. And I think that's something very important for conservatives to point out. And frankly, I think a lot of non-political people actually kind of agree with when you kind of just tell it to them because it just makes sense, It's the fact that human nature is not good. Humans left to their own devices will be destructive and they will kill each other, okay? And people always like to talk about like prehistoric history or ancient history or whatever. Okay, well, look at what have humans been doing since the beginning of time? Have they been all singing Kumbaya? Have they all been locking arms and singing Imagine by John Lennon since the beginning of time? And it wasn't until like the 20th century came along and Hitler was bad. And no, humans since the beginning of time have been killing each other, raping each other, right? And we basically know that left to their own devices, and especially without any type of constraint, especially moral restraint, but also political and physical restraint, that's what humans will do. The humans will do a bunch of bad stuff, and any kind of analysis of just human history kind of confirm, human nature really isn't so good, So humans
including in that time when it comes time to refresh the tree of liberty with the blood of patriots and tyrants.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you something on this. And there was a video at the time this is airing that was actually a couple of weeks ago, where Don Lemon, yeah, I call him Mr. Lemon, he said something so ridiculous that we had discussed on You Are Here, where he was talking about the Rittenhouse case, and he was saying, well, imagine this, like if Rittenhouse wins, he literally said this, like it's going to show the right that you can just defend your own city, you can defend your own town, that you can defend your own state and your own property. Like this idea that these people genuinely believe that they're elitist, that they're in control, that the government has all the rights, and that the people you're subject to the government is there to not only harm you, but they're there to protect you, that you're not able to take control of your own life. And there's this like centralized, I mean, obviously CNN is a state-controlled media, but still there's this idea of like where they do see themselves almost in a fascistic or communist, some sort of a central planning way. Even today, even though we're a republic and we are supposedly free, these people still see themselves as the central planners for our thought process, for our life. And I did want to, that's why I wanted to pick your brain on this, because oh my gosh, people are just retarded. And you meet really stupid libertarians all the time, and you really meet stupid conservatives. You mentioned a few, like, log cabin conservatism, and I'm sure you've met many mentally challenged.
Did you see the naked dancing guy on the stage in 2016?
No.
Yeah.
So
wait, yes, I did. Yes, I did.
And I'm sure you meet a lot of people like, I'm libertarian, have no fundamental idea of what that means. They're not articulate, and both sides roast each other, and are like, everyone's
Libertarianism
stupid.
means heroin to 5-year-olds.
Yeah, so this is where everyone goes in this.
It really does,
but well, this is what I'm saying, but this is what I want to have this conversation because
he says it tongue in cheek, but that is what it is, though.
This is interesting to me. You're talking about like
child porn,
the connection of the central planning, even if the ideologies are in some way different. The fundamental way they perform central planning might look different in action,
right,
but it's the same fundamental concept. I'm not outing you as an authoritarian, and I'm not saying you are. I'm not saying you are, but obviously you do. You and this is why I've also talked to some other people that are paleos as well, do have this direction of like where it's too far gone. So the way that we have to like delete these people is through like matching fire with fire, force with force, like using central planning and authority to combat this.
Yeah.
I'm not putting words in your mouth. I know how you guys think in that regard. But I don't understand then if he's saying like it all ends the same in a bad way, why would it not end in a bad way?
Like the DeSantis example I brought up to you earlier. But for example, forcing the business to bake the cake or hire the anti-vaxxer.
And even that, you know, these are more like day-to-day things in terms of, because
really is Florida is gonna end in communism? Because no, it's really, is that the direction it's trending? Is it becoming? Do people come to Florida and they're like, you know, this place is getting a little bit authoritarian, or they come here like, holy crap, it's just so nice here? Okay, that's just no. Nope. I reject that premise.
I agree with everything he just said about that central body existing, whether that's in terms of, you know, the corporations buying the state or the state buying the corporations. It's always going to end up with that central body. And so many people were able to understand why that's so problematic over the course of the last 18 months, 2 years because of that. The points of contention that I would have is, how do you make that go away? Because my prescription would be, you need to use the same tactics, not the same policies, but the same tactics in terms of canceling communists, getting them out of positions of power, not allowing for them to, you know, continue to march down the field under the guise of your principles, because, and that really would be the coin toss, is if you could occupy that central state, that's how you would, if it's possible to delete it, be able to delete it, assuming you had the right people in the position for it. The only other way I think you could get it to go away would be that sort of refreshing the tree of liberty. And then even that is kind of a coin toss in itself.
The Great Reset, but
right.
Second Amendment version.
I don't know that the right has the organization or the willpower to get something like that done, because we have. That's
a big problem there. But I mean, like, in terms of like fighting, I'm an ally, right? So in the sense, I'm with you in that we should
One
fight.
struggle.
Right. So I want to be a part of fighting back against the communists, right? And if we're talking about culture wars, like, this is what we're doing right here, right now, right? We're fighting the culture wars now. Like, we're doing it through media, right? Some people do it in other ways. But my question to you is,
fighting I agree on the culture wars. No, you don't, because you literally just said that fighting the culture war means, aren't you just like the communists? Isn't that McCarthyism? Isn't that McCarthyism? I mean, I don't really think McCarthyism is even also, but it also, you know, terrible. But still, even that said, it's just like, you know, you can't truly fight the culture war if you're unwilling to actually enforce culture, set any type of norms or trends or narratives in culture. I'm not saying that conservatives have the ability to do that right now, because obviously we don't. We are basically minorities and essentially don't really even exist at all in the institutions that actually control culture and narratives and things like that, obviously. But, you know, in the case that we do manage to retake those things, you have people like Austin Petersen who will get up here and just say, well, isn't that cancel culture to enforce cultural norms and cultural traditions? So, and this is the thing, right? Libertarians always say, well, we don't agree on the governmental stuff, but we do agree on the culture. No, you don't agree on the culture war. You don't. And he admitted earlier in the debate he doesn't, because you don't actually want to set narratives or even really control culture whatsoever. You just want there essentially to be an anti-culture, right? You essentially just want there to be cultural freedom for everyone. We're going to have drag queens and evangelical Christians and Catholic priests and you know, I don't know, tatted up, pierced up, dragon-looking e-girls. We can all just coexist, and it's all about the freedom. But, you know, that first of all, that's not going to work. Okay, it's just not going to work. The Catholic priest and the evangelical Christian versus the you know, the drag queen or whatever, they're too polarly opposed to actually really realistically exist in sizable portions and sizable pluralities in the same society. But even so, that's not, you know, that's really not what conservatives want. You know, that's not what I want. That's not what John wants. That's not what any real cultural warrior wants there to actually be. No, there actually needs to be a culture, not just an anti-culture, not just an anarchy of a lack of culture. We want there to be an actual culture. And that's why we say we're fighting the culture. You're not fighting a culture war if there's not an actually a culture that you want to set. And when I say a culture, I don't just mean a culture of freedom, because a culture of just freedom is not a culture, right? Because a culture with no norms, no traditions, no culture is not a culture. So you can't really say that you're on board with the culture wars, is not the government, because really, you ask any libertarian, you really get to the bottom of it. They're not for that either. Okay, they're not for it either. Even the ones who are like, you know, I'm a Christian too, and I'm a reactionary Christian, but I'm also a libertarian. No, you're not. You're I mean, realistically, you really grill them, they will always admit in the end that they're not really two things at once, you know?
You agree that the private...
And also, what did he say earlier? I'm not really a traditionalist. I'm not really socially liberal. Then you don't agree. I mean, I am socially liberal. That's what he said. He said, I'm not really traditionalist. I'm very socially liberal. Then you're not on our side. You're not fighting the same culture. You're not fighting a culture war at all. If you have the same social stances, minus abortion, technically, if you have the same social stances as the people we're supposedly fighting the culture war against, then you're not fighting you're literally on their side in the culture war. So this alliance, really, I mean, the fusionist alliance was a mistake, and quite frankly, I think this debate, you know, in many ways, I don't even know if the debate, you know, in the actual debate, but I think our reaction to the debate really is exposing the kind of the grand flaw with this idea that the libertarians and the conservatives really are like these great allies. You know, it's like, are we really though? You know, I don't care if we both technically fall under the Republican Party most of the time. You know, even though we both have our different qualms with them, but we both have our qualms with the Republican Party. But the idea that because we vaguely fall into the same political party most of the time means we're at all similar ideologies, I think we're kind of pointing out that no, we're really not. You know, we're really not that similar. And so, you know, I really don't think that and when I say our movement, I'm not just talking about the Republican Party, the Republican constituency, but the actual populist right, the nationalist right. I don't think that I won't say I'll just say the real conservatives. I don't think we're really going to ultimately find that much in common with the libertarians, you know. I think we really are in a camp. Honestly, I think we're really in a camp of our own, because I'm not really a fan of, well, the populist right will get along with the populist left. I'm not really a fan of that either. You know, I think we're really in a camp of our own. I think probably the biggest allies we might have is like non-political people who are Christian and traditional and authentic, not just saying it, which is another problem in America, the inauthentic, you know, Christianity. The go to church on Easter every year type of Christianity, but you tell people, you know, that type of stuff, New Age, all that nonsense, right? But if anything, I'd say those are probably our bigger allies. You know, the kind of tent is kind of more so that than it is, you know, libertarians. You know what I mean?
Business should be told by the governors of the states to hire the person that doesn't want to take a vaccine. So we're not talking about the federal government mandate. We're not talking about the authoritarianism of the Biden administration. What we're talking about here is specifically in relation to the concept of the 2016 debate with Gary Johnson, where I said that the bakers should not be forced to bake the wedding cake for the gay couple, not because I agree with him, but because I believe in his private property rights and his freedom of speech and his freedom of association, his freedom of religion.
And we've talked about the mandate thing, you know, a million times before. I mean, obviously, you're not really free to choose if, you know, the government's not making you, just corporate America and your job and your groceries, you know, everywhere you need to go or you want to go to like live like a human being. You know, if all those things are still enforcing mandates, then you're not really free to choose in that society, you know, in terms of, you know, the certain discussion we're having with that thing. Okay. That's about all I can say because we're on YouTube. But
what Ron DeSantis and what other governors are saying in this country are that private businesses, if you have, like, let's say a liberal bookstore like Portlandia, right, a feminist lesbian bookstore has 20 employees, and the owner of that feminist lesbian communist bookstore wants to require that their employees be vaccinated. Do you think that Governor DeSantis was correct and mandating that that private business not be allowed to mandate that of their employees.
Yes. Yes. And you know, it's very it's also kind of a caricature. It's kind of a straw man too, because you know, obviously we know it's not just Portlandia bookstore. You know, we know that it's all the major employers in the state that are not just far left feminist bookstores. Okay, you know, we know that it's the corporate. It's like actual like real places to work that are doing it. You know, so the idea that it's just well, it's just one feminist bookstore. Why are you so no? But it's not. We're talking about. You know, Biden's mandate affects 100 million workers, okay, in America. That's not like one tiny bookstore. It's a very big thing, you know. And so, yeah, but even so, yeah, to protect all of the workers with a blanket policy, even if that, you know, it protects, I don't know, a communist blue-haired woman in a freaking, you know, Portlandia, whatever he said. Okay, fine, you know, it's a good policy regardless. So. That's all I can say.
I do, and I think that he's correct because it oversimplifies the day-to-day operations of the business. So if DeSantis came in and said, you will bake the gay wedding cake, that means that that business now has to use its resources to bake a gay wedding cake, and time has to be taken out to do something with which the business is in opposition. As opposed to, this person may or may not be vaccinated, it's their private medical decision. That's not going to affect the day-to-day operations of the business. Their job exists independently.
What about if it's polio or Ebola? And we're not talking about COVID-19
diseases that
anymore.
actually exist.
Yeah, we're talking. So in essence, so that would have to be some kind of a blanket concept. You may want.
Okay, for formal YouTube guidelines, I disavow what he just said. Okay, this is a reaction stream. Okay, please don't take the video down. We're reacting to this debate. Okay, I didn't say that. It's my video. I didn't say that. It's fair use. Okay.
I want to apply it to COVID because we all know that it's BS.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the concept of polio or when it comes to Ebola,
this.
there are people whose idea of libertarianism is that
if you understand this, John actually travels into the future and steals my takes. If you understand that, if you take that into
I have the right to cough diseases into your face,
yeah,
as long as I don't touch you with my physical form, right? Or that I had, there were people who at the beginning of the pandemic would walk into businesses and would cough on produce and actually spread COVID-19 deliberately. That is a violent attack, right?
Yes.
That is a violation of what even libertarians would call a non-aggression principle, right? Yes. So that is why I think that in the sense that the in the day-to-day operations, it would certainly throw a monkey wrench into their day-to-day operations if somebody came in with polio or with some other deadly disease and says, well, I'm not going to get vaccinated against polio and I have a right to spread it to other people because Governor DeSantis says you can't require vaccination in your private business.
But that.
During this portion of the debate, a couple of things were said that weren't YouTube friendly, so to go watch the entire debate uncensored, make sure to go to blazetv.com/Elijah and use that promo code for $10 off. All right, let's get back to it.
But you would agree.
Thank you, Savannah Hernandez. I appreciate that.
With the concept of mandatory vaccination in some degree. So, for example, if you want to go to South America, you have to have a certain mandatory vaccinations in order to travel across their national borders and their national sovereignty. Yeah. Right. So, if immigrants want to come to the United States right now, and if they had an infectious disease and there was an immunization against that infectious disease, should they be required to be immunized against that infectious disease before they travel to the United States?
Yeah, depending on the disease.
So that's a vaccine passport.
Right.
So you're not against the concept of vaccine passports entirely.
No.
Just in regards to COVID specifically.
Correct.
Okay. Conservatives for vaccine passports.
See, but that's
this.
I want to go in on the.
I would just skip this entirely. It's just the things I would like to say I cannot say. So. It's not good.
True, because largely because they're gross.
I don't
want
want
so many
vaxxed
diseases.
or unvaxxed in my country, but I will say that that it is funny though. I'm getting a kick out of this. I was texting my wife right now. I was laughing because I was like, it's funny to watch John actually talk to a smart person. Like, cause John's always just like dunking on people, and then to see somebody who actually knows their stuff. And this is why I like you actually, because I don't like libertarians. I don't, because I do think that the most people that are libertarian
victory. Stop.
are either A, they literally don't know anything and they don't claim to know anything. They're just like, I think I'm libertarian, or B, they are like vegans, where they have to tell you they're libertarian all the time and explain, oh, I'm libertarian, and like they make these most absurd claims, like you said, where it's like, well, technically a 5-year-old's still a person, and it's like, dude, stop, stop it, stop. I don't want this.
I want to go in on the vaccine passport a little bit.
No, but I'm coming to this. I'm coming to this.
Because, and you know that because
No.
Equal protections.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why is he gonna get in trouble, huh? Why exactly can't we have an open debate? Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah, that's correct, is it not? Oh, huh, interesting. True. Factual.
yes,
Even if they're not Americans.
see that's the point I would disagree with. I think that there should be some distinction there between people
But
who
you can't
are
kill
under the
them.
I'm not saying you should kill them.
Right.
I'm just saying that you could treat them differently, especially if they came from
Sure.
a part of the world that had a higher propensity towards these types of diseases that we had eradicated. Not even
Sure.
talking about COVID. At which point, I think that it would be totally justified to
Right. There
ask
are,
them to have
and
some
there's
sort of
there's a national
vaccine.
security argument there, right? And,
Yeah.
and that can become a blanket term, and it can become dangerous and problematic when we start talking about applying national security to whatever situation that it is. Especially, but there is a national security implication to immigration, and I do think that there do need to be immigration restrictions to a certain degree, right? I'm more laissez-faire than you possibly when it comes to immigration, but again, I'm not being an anarchist. Right, I do believe that, there have been examples in American history when our immigration policies have been better than others, and the best would have been the Ellis Island years, right? The years. What's sad to me is that the greatest
Incorrect.
periods of American history are the most maligned by the left. The Gilded Age of the United States. The presidents of the United States that were the most conservative are the most maligned or the most forgotten. Calvin Coolidge, Grover Cleveland, and others.
I was waiting for him to say that. Really? Let me. What immigration act did Calvin Coolidge sign in 1924? Really, the great conservative president. We like Calvin Coolidge. Really? What was Calvin Coolidge's stance on immigration? Calvin Coolidge actually ended the so-called Ellis Island years, right, with the 1924 Immigration Act. And I think Calvin Coolidge is a great president. Don't get me wrong. Let me just say, but if you're gonna say that Calvin Coolidge is like the guy, what was Calvin Coolidge's stances on immigration? And even further, I would argue, really, I think the pinnacle of American civilization is probably between like the Roaring 20s and the early 60s, right? I think those were like kind of our best years, and then the 60s come around, and we have the hippies, and we have all those liberal movements, and it really went downhill from there. I guess you could say the 80s and 90s a little bit kind of resurgence, but anyways, it's kind of a glass gas, right? Generally, the trend has been downhill ever really since then. So understanding that but then really, if you want to narrow this down, you could make an argument that the golden era of American history is literally, I mean, it's kind of an oversimplification, don't get me wrong, but if you want to, I would not say our golden age as a civilization was the Gilded Age, right? I think it was, generally we were probably better off than we are today, but you could argue that the time period between the 1924 Immigration Act, which was restrictionist in nature, which heavily reduced legal immigration, and then the 1965 Immigration Act, which we all know the story there. That's the modern immigration system, essentially, right? That sort of time period, you could argue, right, the Roaring 20s to the early 60s really was kind of our peak as a civilization. And ever since then, it's kind of been... So other factors obviously are to be taken into account, but I would argue that, the people who always say, like, we need mass immigration for prosperity. We need immigration in general for prosperity. Why exactly is it that America's sort of best years, America's golden years, were the years where actually we were fairly restrictionist on, that stuff? So take this into account.
Right, and until we can adopt a language of liberty, a common language of liberty on the right, we're going to continue to fight amongst ourselves when we should be fighting against, we should have right unity against the communists and the socialists. There's a reason why I voted for Donald Trump, in part because I do think we needed to prevent a united front against what was happening with the left and the consolidation of power.
Yeah, but it's very hard to have you see something as basic as liberty, right? The historical Christian understanding of liberty is, again, very different from, the postmodern, I want to say postmodern, probably just the post-enlightenment, definition where liberty is basically just, liberty and basically freedom are just totally synonymous, right? It's not really the historical Christian, or you could even just say Western understanding of liberty. You want to even go back to the Greeks, right? Think about some like Aristotelian freedom, right? Concepts like that. So this really is the issue, and this is why I brought up earlier. I don't think that alliance is really as easy or as really possible or practical, because I wouldn't say we agree on what liberty means, right? In our sense, we obviously believe that liberty liberty comes with the freedom to make choices, and you shouldn't have to make good choices, and you obviously shouldn't have some government bureaucrat banning you from making good choices or trying to better yourself in a genuine sense. But it also means liberty in our basically worldview also means freedom, not just from government trying to force immorality on you, but also comes from freedom from vice, right? And this is something very central to our worldview is freedom from vice, right? You're not free when you're trapped in vice and sin. You're actually rather free than the opposite of that, and like we don't consider addiction, we don't consider being in states of mortal sin, we don't consider addiction to vice essentially to be free. Like we would not say that person is free. Libertarian would say yes, that person is free because they're just making their own choices, which again comes from that humanist worldview of human nature, that left to their own devices, humans will be rational and humans will make good choices. And again, this really does boil down to the human nature thing, because our view of human nature says no, it's actually not like that. And if you put humans in a state too much freedom, they're actually just going to basically destroy themselves because their nature is predisposed towards that, right? The libertarian argues the opposite. Our nature is predisposed to be fantastic moral people. We're all going to be angels. No, but that's where we disagree. So
I do. There are plenty of libertarians. You say you hate most libertarians. There are plenty of libertarians who piss me off too. And the way that they treated Donald Trump in a way that was completely hypocritical, because all that matters really is policy. And when it came to Donald Trump, his policies were better. If they had voted for Donald Trump instead of Joe Jorgensen, we wouldn't have to be fighting over vaccine mandates, because there wouldn't have been an OSHA mandate, right? So yes, I do think that sometimes people make the perfect the enemy of the good, right? And that sometimes you're not going to get liberty exactly when you want it, but that you do need a good cohesive strategy to do it. But the most effective strategy is the one that the conservatives are the worst at. And now we have a bias because we work with the best of the best, right? Elijah, you are a star. You've got a big fan base online as well, right? And the thing is, you're surrounded by people who are very good at media. You're surrounded by people who are good at fighting the culture wars. So you might sometimes be confused at thinking that conservatives are good at fighting the culture wars because you are good at fighting the culture wars. But for the most part, conservatives suck at fighting the culture wars. For the most part, we lose in Hollywood and we lose in television and we lose in the media to a large degree because...
Yeah, because the reason we lose, Austin Petersen, is because most of the conservatives that are attempting at these institutions or whatever, or just the conservative establishment, the conservative apparatus in general, thinks like you and not like John. Okay? They have your mentality, they have your worldview philosophy, not so much John Doyle's. Okay? So this is him trying to look at John and say, see, well, we're not all the conservatives are as effective as you. Well, because they think like Austin Petersen and not like John Doyle. If they all thought like John Doyle, if they all had the mentality of John Doyle, right, they would actually be effective at infiltrating institutions and actually use change in set narratives. But of course, it's really not. It's not John. Like John is the one who is trying to get conservatives to think differently, okay, than they are now, right? He's not really a fan of the way, and we are not fans either of the way the conservative establishment has sort of taught the values of our base, right? So you can't really pin that on us. If anything, it's your fault. It's your fault because you're the one basically pushing conservative narratives that, well, conservatism, I'm a principled conservative. I'm so principled I like losing, right?
Because we are not good at fighting the culture wars, because we don't defend. It's not that we don't defend our culture, but it's that we can't represent our culture in a way that
No, you don't defend your culture though, because you believe that your culture is simply a lack of culture. You believe your culture is just that. Exactly. I'm not gonna even that's what you believe your culture is. Your culture is a lack of culture where you just have a bunch of people and they can just do whatever they want and that's it. That's our culture. No. At least traditionally that was, sure, maybe I wouldn't say it. Maybe in a sense now, no, I wouldn't. I probably wouldn't say that. I'd say in a sense now there is actually a culture. It's just a very bad one, right? But there are still consensus. There is still kind of a consensus. There's definitely still social norms or whatever. But that's that. that's traditionally our culture in America. That was not. There was definitely still a culture. Okay. So yeah, you literally cannot defend what you perceive to be your culture if you don't believe in a culture. And anytime we do try to believe in a culture, you're like, no, that's tyranny. No, that's cancel culture, bro. Okay, well, just say it. You don't believe in a culture at all. You know, the problem is if you're not creating a culture, inevitably your enemies are going to create a culture. You know, you really realistically cannot survive with a neutral culture, a value neutral public square or whatever it is. Like, you know, you're never going to literally, if you just stand there and do that, you know, someone inevitably is going to start creating culture. And so, you know, we're not for the right just standing for a value neutral culture, or what I should really say, because every culture has values, so you can't really have a value neutral culture. You just have no culture at all. We on the right, we on the real right, I guess we would say the real conservatives, we're not for, you know, establishing an anti-culture, a lack of culture. We're for establishing a culture of our own. And that's a big difference between us and libertarians. You know, you ask a libertarian what, you know, people, we'll kind of, you notice it's almost like, I say in a sense, it almost reminds me of like, you know, a Mormon trying to debate a Christian, right? But it's like we use these same terms, right? We're for American culture or whatever, but we don't actually agree on what those things are, right? We say, you know, one side you have like, you ask a conservative, a real conservative, what American culture is, and they'll actually bring up like real cultural things, right? Like, you know, the traditional Christian work ethic, right? I mean, it's really, used to call it the Protestant work ethic, but we said no denom divide. So okay, we'll rename it the Christian work ethic, right? Things like that. These are real cultural principles. Okay, I'm not gonna get all of them because, you know, we're not gonna do all that today. But as compared to, you ask what but you will say, right? Speaking English, these certain cultural values that are based on Christianity. You could even point to like more like just frivolous things like hot dogs and hamburgers, but even so, that is still, you know, American culture. I think there are certain values in our society of, you know, kind of the role of the family, whatnot, what have you, right? You ask a libertarian what American culture is supposed to be, and it's just freedom, right? It's just, well, our culture is freedom. That's not a culture. But even so, if we as conservatives are working toward a tradition, our idea of bringing back American culture is working towards a traditional Christian English-speaking moral society, and the libertarian concept is just cultural anarchy, right? Again, we might say the same thing, but we're literally going towards things that frankly are probably the opposite of one another. So
romanticizes it to an extent that people find it so uplifting that they want to be a part of it, right? We are in the 1980s, our culture was at its zenith, in my opinion. And the reason why we were so beloved overseas was because people loved Marty McFly and Back to the Future. They loved Ronald Reagan. They saw the United States as a great good. And yes, we had the great enemy, the great evil of the communist country, but we were very good at making our culture look excellent. And now that the left has taken control of our culture here in the United States, they are very good at making America look like an evil, terroristic, bad guy. And we, to some extent, we haven't even been fighting in their ground, because conservatives have been trying to stamp out libertarians as if we were responsible, as if too much freedom itself has been responsible for the rise of liberalism in the United States, and not stuffy, fat.
You were, because, you know, we had basically a political opportunity to, you know, stop liberalism before it started, and instead you tolerated it in the name of free speech. You eased up on the 60s, and that's what happened. So yes, the modern liberal movement, yes, it was going to have any kind of natural strength, but, you know, really ultimately is the product of, you know, poor conservatism, and I think that's pretty obvious. And that poor conservatism is precisely because we had conservatives thinking like libertarians. So I think that's
chubby,
clear,
bow-tied conservatives.
Oh, my bad.
Is boring the shit out of everyone with their crappy patriotic specials and their saluting of the flag.
Yeah, exactly. In their what about their low tax is this, low tax is that. Okay.
and their false
Half of those
patriotism
cliches
wrapped in the
are
flag, carrying the cross,
cliches,
that is the trappings of patriotism, that is not true patriotism. And we're starting to see a new renaissance here. You know, again, you know, heck off commie and slightly offensive, and what the Blaze is doing here are good examples of fighting back against the culture war. But that's the spearhead. But we need more.
There's like two, and I do want to bring this up. I want to discuss this further because there's like, yeah, when you think of like conservative or right-leaning companies that I would say
really
Blaze is
saying
probably
anything.
more
Like, I mean,
becoming
they
more
don't really-
libertarian,
did he
but
really
was
say
more
anything
conservative. But there's like two companies,
kind of
right?
a
So I mean, like
random
we're
fact
talking, they're talking about like
Fox
you can,
News
yes,
and
like
this.
you can like name them. And as we jump into this, I do want to discuss this, but I got to let you know this, that obviously, unfortunately, we do live in a society where even to rent a house, you do need a credit score. And a lot of people don't think your credit score is important. Wait until you figure out what happens if you try to use no credit. I know they do, because people have these really strong opinions of like where they lie politically, and that's why they're on shows, like you were saying, and they stand somewhere.
Mr. Easy says Lolberts think the 80s was the height of American culture, wanting to revert back to a previous state of liberal decay is not conservatism. Yeah, I agree with that. Like, you know, the 80s, comparatively speaking to today, obviously were a good time. And, you know, you look back at the 80s, it's nostalgia. There are many aspects of the 80s and 80s movies that are, you know, genuinely based, and you're like, oh, that's not. But it's also important to note that, you know, the 80s are not the pinnacle of American culture. You know, in many ways, the 80s also saw the platforming. I mean, I think it goes back. I think it really goes back further to the 60s, but still saw the platforming of a lot of just, you know, things that ultimately resulted, you know, would get worse and worse and basically compound into like the modern liberal culture we have today. And there were a lot of redeemable aspects of the 80s. We can't say it all started there. It was, you know, all went downhill from there. I think in many ways the 80s was a brief cultural renaissance, but it's, you know, the idea that that's kind of the peak, like that's the best time I don't buy that at all, you know. I wouldn't say that at all.
Most people are trying to figure out what the hell they believe. They're waking up constantly. It feels like it's a nightmare that you never get out of, and just trying to understand like what's the way out of this shit. Like it's just, I know it's bad, and everyone says they have the solution, but it's none of it's working because it's getting progressively worse. So what do I do? And people are just wanting to kill people now. But if you're not, before you go and start killing people, let's see if there's another alternative. And this brings my road in politics. I started out as like, I would say more of like a centrist, neoliberal type of person. I'm from LA. I'm not going to apologize for that. Got into the political world, didn't even know my pants were skinny until I got on air. And then people in middle America are like, what are you doing? You know, like that kind of stuff. But I just, you know, just a LA boy. And I didn't even realize there was anything weird about that to like the rest of America. I was out of touch. I was busy. I was in college doing my thing. You know what I mean? Like I knew politics. I voted. I watched Alex Jones, like, but I still wasn't like, I didn't know about the culture of politics. Then I go through and then I get brought into like this PragerU type conservatism, I guess, which is like, yeah, log cabin Republicans, black conservative. Wow, black people can think, you know, like, and it's like, it's kind of racist when you think about it, that whole aspect. Like,
tokenism.
Yes, it is. So then there's that. And then I was like, dude, this, like you said, then I would go to like be around these people and I'm like, these people are all talk. Like these people are like, they're like, you know, we got to fight censorship. And it's like, what does that mean? Like you're not doing anything. Like buy my book, you know, so you can learn how we can all get along. And you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? So I started getting frustrated. Then I go and I'm like, who's the people who seem to really be willing to do things? I'm like, okay, there are these staunch conservatives over here that I don't know what they're doing, but they're angry. They're kind of racist. I kind of like them. And they're like, but like meaning like but I meant like, I'm like, all right. But they're so bad at PR. Like they're just assholes and like nobody likes them because It's just like, they're not just like angry at women. It's like they're bitter at the world. And I get it though, but I like the bitterness. It's just like, they don't have their PR team needs to be rethought because everyone hates them.
You're conflating me with like that trad calf online.
I'm not saying you. I'm pointing over here, not you.
I'm not saying you. When I think trad cath, I think Doyle.
This is anti-Doyle rhetoric.
But I'm not saying you.
I'm gonna remember that. You're gonna have to report to camps when I take power.
No, because you don't have a bad PR campaign. I'm trying to get you to track with me here.
People love me. They love me.
Yes, they do. The gays love them. The blacks love them. Everyone.
I will say I think what's being described there is not. the majority of Doyle's fan base is like actually not like that. You find a very interesting distinction, and I think I pointed this out, and this is something you kind of tell at the APU events. You can kind of tell who the real like Doyle heads are, like the true Hawk appreciators are, because you kind of you notice they always have like very good physiognomy, and they always come in, you know, they look like Chads, and they clearly take care of themselves, and that's something that there's something that obviously that John makes like a big deal out of in his videos, and I think is very good. But that is to say, the perpetually online kind of you know, LARPer thing is a problem. I don't think it's really a majority of John's fan base. That's what I will say. Other communities, sure. I don't know so much with John.
Loves him. Women love him.
True.
And
the gay midgets.
Yeah, the gay midgets love you too. But what I meant is this. So there's that. I'm like, okay, these people like have pretty strong views that look like they could accomplish something, but they keep getting deleted offline and stuff. They don't even have any like route to accomplish their goals besides just being angry and having their groups. Then I see this side. Militia guys that like whether you disagree or agree with January 6th, they did something.
Yep.
And so I'm like, okay, so there's these groups of people, but obviously January 6th was a honeypot, a psyop, and that was
FBI
that
plot.
was stupid too. So I'm just saying, like on both sides. So I'm seeing these two people who are like, okay, maybe these people could do something. Like these real like base militia,
Yes,
libertarian,
1128
let's
part
live
5,
independently, and then these like conservatives who are going literally let's just delete these people that we hate. No, but like that's what I saw. And I want you guys to both answer me. It's like,
All right, are we back?
what is the way forward? Because I don't know. Not going to move us forward in the way of that. Like, what's the way forward? What does someone like me who's going, look, I want to do something, I want to believe in
Okay, we
something, but
should be
why is
back
your
now.
way forward
It
the
happened
way?
again. Look at that.
I think firstly we should
sad.
acknowledge that the fact that like he and I can have a discussion is like what the country
We're
should
back.
look like, and I don't
Part
mean that
7,
in
it's
terms
true,
of this
part
sort of
7,
Dave
it's
Rubin.
struck,
Isn't it
it's
great that we
struck.
can have conversations kind of idea? I mean it like conservatives are so often just begging for any sense of like
Forever we must hate, for we remember 1128. It's true. It's true.
inclusivity in the culture, not like inclusivity, you know, with a
Fit in.
Yeah, and it's like
All right,
if
good
we
night,
were
Noah.
actually
Thank
having
you.
debates that were moving the country in the
I'll see
literally
you.
right direction, that's what this would look like. As opposed to now, we have debates where we're on the back foot with issues of like gender identity and things like that because we have lost so badly. Like if we were having debates about like right wing versus farther right wing or something, it'd be like, oh, I don't know if we should have 2-day shipping for M60s on Amazon. Well, I disagree. Like things like that. That would be so epic. But because we've been so impotent for the last 100 years, we can't actually have that because
So
we, like
true.
you said, we don't really know like what the direction forward is. I just wanted to make that
Well,
clear.
but you know, and that's why, like when you know Senator Josh Hawley, for my criticisms of him, he does make good points when he talks about the attacks on masculinity and men retreating into pornography and video games and idleness and things like that, right? But it's not. The thing is that when you're attacking like people's form of entertainment, for example, you're not attacking the form of entertainment that our particular tribe happens to find the most entertaining. Is sitting on your butt watching a football game on a video screen as being as idle as playing a video game? I would actually argue that it's being more idle because you're not participating, whereas with a video game you're actually participating. You might actually learn something that day, right? So I mean, we anesthetize ourselves as a culture and a society in many ways. And listen, everybody's got their form of entertainment,
I stopped paying attention
some
for,
forms
like,
of entertainment I think people can
3
take too
minutes,
far.
and
But I
now
think
they're talking
pornography
about
can
video
be
games. I don't know
problematic
what's
for people,
happening.
but it's probably a symptom of a larger disease.
doesn't sound all that
But
interesting,
when
though,
you're
to be
asking me a
honest.
question
I don't know
about
if
like
I
things
should
like what
care.
is the way forward, well, can we look at something right now can we say right now that Bitcoin is successful? That in terms of like mainstream adoption, that at least we're on the verge of mainstream adoption, if not total mainstream adoption yet. You can't buy things on Amazon with Bitcoin yet, but the day that you can is going to be the biggest game changer ever, because Bitcoin
really? Is
is a libertarian institution, and it was
Oh.
set up to avoid probably the most
Well,
anti-libertarian institution in the world, which
Bitcoin is a cope. I'm not against cryptocurrency. I think it's kind of epic in a way, but like it's just the day Bitcoin becomes mainstream, which they've been talking about for like 4 years. The second we got Bitcoin, it's gonna change the game because you won't gonna don't get it's cryptocurrency is very good, especially very good for political dissonance in America, because I think people are going to have to deal with that, right? Like you have someone like Nick or even Laura Loomer, Milo, like people who are banned from all the major processing services, and that's going to be a lot of us soon. I mean, obviously, Bitcoin helps in that sense. It helps that there is like kind of a counter to the Federal Reserve, obviously, but like just the idea that like oh my, it's just such a cope. It's like a soy jack. Like, oh, but Bitcoin's gonna come, bro. It's gonna change the game. All the financial world's gonna be turned upside down. Really? Is that what it is? I don't know. I really don't think so. I mean, yeah, so whatever.
For the banks, right?
We'll
and if there's
see.
one thing that paleos
We'll
and
see.
libertarians agree on, it is the central control of the banking cartels in this country.
We hate them here too. Slightly offensive. We condemn them.
Our money monopoly that we have in the world with the central banks and the IDF and the global bank, and the way that they load us up with debt and the way that they saddle us with it, that is the ultimate control. Money was not initially a creation of government. It was a creation of individuals who decided currency for their country, perceived value to the citizens at the time, and now we
honestly, I agree with a lot of what he's saying on it, but it's just not interesting, and like I said, it's a soy jag. It's like cryptocurrency is gonna come along and save our civilization. No, it's not. Hold on. Must change out camera battery again. That's my soy jack. That's your guys' soy jack. Every time the battery stops, I have to switch out the battery and I lose the webcam. Everyone's like, "Oh, you see, his technical problem struck again." 11:28. That's your guys. That's this community soy jack. Is every time I have to do this because I don't have an actual webcam. Everyone has it's you know what? There you go. That's your guys' soy jack. But anyways, one thing I did want to address this comment because I thought it was a very good chat. Give me a second here. Let me freaking switch this out. All right, there we go. So, where did I go? Marxist Dixie says, libertarians are a minority on the right. Why do they get to dictate the Republican Party? Well, I think it's very important to understand that, you could argue it's kind of almost a creation in some ways of, the Republic itself. But I think it's also just a reality that, in general, the concept of democracy, and it's universally, I would say, the concept of democracy, the concept of rule by the people is universally a farce. It's just a lie. Okay, I mean, just the reality of the situation is that minority rule is the truth anywhere in civilization, right? It is not the despite the concepts of democracy. The people never decide anything in society because only about 10 to 20% of the people have the mental capacity, or not even always the mental capacity, but even just the caringness to actually kind of be involved in that stuff and actually meaningfully take interest in the actual workings of the political system. And so it's just but in democracy, it's sort of that's all to say the concept of like our democracy. It doesn't matter in many cases that even though we have delegate nominations, all that stuff, our system is fairly democratic. It still doesn't matter because ultimately it is he who controls the narratives that really has the political power. And even though libertarians are a minority, and even though neoconservatives are a minority in the real Republican base, simply because of the fact that they have the institutional power and influence to discern spread the narratives and control the narratives that control the Republican Party, that's what really matters. And that's kind of why I've said this in the past, like in order for us to be a permanent political force, right, we basically need to be, as national conservatives, as the real conservatives, we need to be the ones who can build that infrastructure for ourselves, okay? And that's to say we don't just, being grassroots is great, being grassroots is fun, You know, it's nice to have a connection with the base, whatever. But realistically, if you want to, you know, if we want to actually fix the country in the long term, we don't have the power to do it now, but we need to start building it. In the long term, we need to actually basically have the institutional power where, you know, we have the real control. Like, that's how the Republican Party is. We know that the neocons and to an extent the libertarians, to an extent, have the real control in the party, even if they're putting up supposedly populist people, you know, even if they're running Trump and Trumpist candidates, you know, or really, you know, and that's not to say 2016 Trump was like just controlled opposition, but you could see they ultimately kind of got to him in many ways, right? We need to have that kind of power for ourselves, right? We need to have the sort of power where, regardless of, you know, running a very good populist grassroots election or whatever, we have the permanent power to control politics and to control policy, you know? And in order to do that, I think our movement is going to not just need, you know, flashy sort of grassroots activism, which we have to do. You know, we're at that stage where we have to do it. But also, I would say we need to be building like permanent infrastructure. You know what I mean? And by permanent, you know, permanent infrastructure also in Washington, D.C. Now, I know a lot of people don't like that, right? That's why, you know, something like American Moment, I know a lot of people on this side of the movement don't like it. They think it's kind of swampy, and I can understand the connotation. But I think also it's important to look at ourselves as something more than just, you know, obviously right now we're political dissidents. Right now we're kind of like, you know, on the fringe, you could say. Right now we're kind of like, you know, the grassroots people, the people without a lot of institutional power. But if we are to treat ourselves seriously, and that's the thing, I think a lot of people in the movement don't ever want to be that, right? They kind of get a dopamine rush. You kind of enjoy the rush of always being on the fringe, always being grassroots. And I understand that, honestly, because being grassroots is fun. Like the energy is fun. But if you're going to think seriously, you can't stay grassroots forever, right? And so it's also going to be very important to actually build things. See, that's why American Moment, something like that, even though like a lot of people don't like it, I understand why people like think it's kind of like sleazy or whatever, because it's a bunch of like people in suits in Washington, D.C., but they're saying they're for nationalism or whatever. I actually think something like that, you know, and I don't know the inner workings of that specific organization, but something like that, we actually need that as a movement. It's actually far more important that we're doing that than, you know, grassroots stuff, which I'm doing mostly grassroots stuff. That's basically what I'm doing. So I'm not disregarding that grassroots stuff isn't good and grassroots stuff isn't necessary, but I'm just saying that if we're going to think seriously with this movement, we have to like have the power to basically have like majority rule in the GOP and stuff like that. Like, we need to have the think tanks in Washington and in DC. And like, honestly, maybe I'm a hypocrite because I never want to live in DC. I mean, maybe I will at some point, but I never want to be there. I don't think I realistically would want to be one of those people who runs the think tanks in DC or whatever. So maybe I'm a hypocrite for saying that, but I'm just being honest. I'm just reflecting honestly that that's what we're going to need. Right? We're going to need, I mean, I think first of all, we're going to need maybe as a good place to start is we need to have like the West Palm Beach, like kind of have the door into Mar-a-Lago and stuff, that type of money, that type of power, the way, you know, a lot of the mainstream conservative organizations and stuff have. But then eventually we're literally all those swampy conservative think tanks in DC that you don't like them, but they are the ones that influence the politics. They're the ones with the control. Long term, we're going to need to do that too. You know, it's like that's our nation's capital. You have to have an arm in the nation's capital to be really influencing policy, you know. And I don't think we're there yet. That's part of why I say, like, we need 4 more years of Trump. We need to elect Trump again to like really kind of solidify this as a movement. But you know, hopefully with kind of enough elections that are there to move the Overton window and build the energy and the apparatus for that, eventually, you know, we can't just be relying on like, whoa, here, we're going to have this person run for president or whatever, and that's going to shift the Overton window for us. No, we have to be the ones that actually have the power in Washington and the power in the think tanks and all that stuff to do that, regardless of, you know, who's running for president in this particular cycle and whether or not, you know, Tucker Carlson or Trump or whatever is going to run for president, you know. That's what we need long term. And that needs to be the long term thinking. I'm not saying we're there yet. I'm not saying like American Moment or American Compass or national conservatism or whatever is just going to like magically change the game overnight. But that needs to be sort of our long term thinking with this, right? Like we talk about a long march, but I guess some people talk about a long march, but, you know, it's also a long march doesn't just mean, you know, be a conservative and go to college. It literally means you have to you have to establish all the institutions that you could argue really have the real power, quote unquote, in society, you know, and I think stuff like that's probably a good start. And so to answer your question, a very long-winded way, that's why, you know, we have minority majority rule in the Republican Party. Now, with that being said, I don't think it's enough to just complain about that. You have to recognize that there will always be minority majority rule in any political institution because democracy is a lie, right? Democracy is simply a matter of who controls the narratives. So what we have to be doing as authentic conservatives is controlling the narratives. And, you know, that doesn't just involve tweeting online, although that's important. Right? You need to be shifting the Overton window in the eyes of just people randomly. Hopefully you can be doing that. But to do it in a powerful sense, you know, you need all of that control. You know, you need all that control. And we can seize it. We can march through the establishment. And we could also build our own. I think we do a combination of both. But that's what we need. That's what we need. So, you know, that's something hey, and let me just say, that's something I think about sometimes. You know, I don't think I have all the power as like an 18-year-old who's in college to go like found my own think tank or whatever. You know what I mean? I think APU inherently in itself is something that's more grassroots because, you know, basically we are a bunch of young people. But it is also something I think about and I consider, like, you know, how exactly do we do this? You know what I mean? How exactly do we get the arm in West Palm Beach, the arm in Washington, D.C.? And, you know, it's not a matter of like selling your soul or whatever. And I'm not even talking about APU. I'm just talking about like generally in our movement. It's more of like a realistic thinking that, you know, we always talk about how society works, but now we need to actually basically now that understanding that this is how society really works, this is how the republic, the democracy, quote unquote, really works. You need to actually work with that. You need to work around that. So that's the thing.
Crypto's the best. And it's like, but they don't even really own any. Like, you know, like people always say this. I don't own a lot of crypto. I own several $1,000s worth, but that's not a lot. But it's it does freak me out. But it's like you're right, because if, like, for instance, it's like if Blaze started paying in crypto, like their employees, if this was a system, it's like really, well, like even with like canceling people or like demonetizing people, it's like if the system that we start using is like people donate and sign up through crypto, and like it's like you're kind of like just, other than trying to fix a system or destroy it with fire, it's like you just, well, I have a new one and we're just leaving the system. Yeah. I'm so glad that you called out the banks, because like people always use that as like, oh, the Jews. And it's like, okay, well, a lot of the families are Jewish, but not all of them are Jewish, and not all of the banks are controlled by Jews. There's some. It's like, really, realistically speaking, you need to actually really figure out what's really going on, and it is the banks.
It's the banks. Everything traces back to the banks.
Yes, I'm saying, like, look at who funds the wars. Look at who's doing everything.
Both sides.
Right, that's what, yeah, the same war, both sides. And it's like, ethnicity aside, or whatever people want to say, it's like, you need to realize, and also, I want to tell you guys who are pretty far right there, by overemphasizing the Jews all the time, you're playing into the bank plan, because they want you to emphasize Jews, because that's call them a racist. Call them a racist, so that they can call you racist, so they can delete you. So you're retarded. You just are, like, by just, you don't understand optics, and you also you don't understand like the reality of like where the real enemy is. It's like, we need to take down the banks, and I think they're too powerful to take down like by fighting, because they actually control the armies. And remember that many of the Austrian economists who were anti-central banks were Jews. It's you know, many, the modern like Jewish thought leaders in the libertarian movement, you know, these are Jewish people who hated the central banks and hated the Federal Reserve, and those are the, you know, if you want to engage in tokenism, then, you know, you have those people there, right? You know, but that's what I'm saying though, and that's, but I just want to genuinely say that to the people that really like spend their time overemphasizing things on the Jews. But this like, is pure populism, by the way. If you want to talk about the true form of populism, libertarian populism, it is the anti-central bank view that is the thing that could, in theory, unite the right. But you know what the big problem is? It's boring. It's one of those topics. It's not sexy, right? I think it's sexy, right? Talking about Andrew Jackson killing the second central bank, like Thomas Jefferson waging wars against Alexander Hamilton and George Washington to try and stop there being a first central bank. But I mean, like, why is it that this is not taught in our history class? Why is it that we don't learn about money? Why is it they don't teach us about investing in school, right? This is how you get a 1%, because you have a secret knowledge that is protected from young people here in the United States, and we do not teach them about how our banking system works. It is the biggest cartel in the world. It is the model of central control. It is a plank in the Communist Manifesto. It is the #1 enemy of freedom.
Libertarian populism can't exist because populism is not really an ideology, right? Populism is kind of just an approach to politics, right? Kind of just like a means to an end. So you can have like a populist, quote unquote, form of anything, But I would say what the real oxymoron is not libertarian populism. It would be libertarian conservatism. Okay, you're not a conservatarian, quote unquote. That is the ultimate oxymoron. That's what I would say.
Federal Reserve System is the #1 enemy of freedom in the United States, and it's the one that people know the least about because it's the least interesting to them.
But it's intentional. Like
It's true. It's not interesting to me.
They will see that we are vindicated.
There
I would say
6.3% inflation in the last year.
never like date a Jew and like people just have these like understandings like trad cap.
The inflation, the central bank. I don't care, dude. It's not interesting.
Co-host like just to start, like I was talking to my wife last night, and I was like I really like this guy Austin because like even though we probably fundamentally disagree on a lot, he's actually like.
Is there anything else actually to this debate?
Swearing an oath to uphold. So that's what I think, because we kind of get into these questions of national identity or human rights, and we're like, let's just agree to disagree. I don't think we can. You and I can agree to disagree because we're still kind of on the same page. But in terms of like literally where we're approaching the level of national divorce being like a mainstream topic, I don't think we can agree to disagree on like the very foundations of our country.
Physical removal, so to speak.
Deletion.
You guys are you're literally feds. You are putting that in my mouth, talking about refreshing the tree of liberty. And John wants to delete these.
That's our new slogan. All libertarians are feds. Can we get in chat? # all libertarians are feds. It's true. Sources have confirmed this. I'm going to sell that on a t-shirt. We're making merch soon for my brand, and we'll probably make merch for APU too. We need that. We need all libertarians are feds shirt. That would be hilarious. And you would they'll be so upset at it, but it would be cool. All libertarians are feds. It is so true. It is so true. I was talking about that with Red Eagle the other day. We're literally just like we're calling it this libertarian we don't like, and we're just like, this guy's a fed. And it's true. It's true. And John says it too, which we've not talked about. We've not referred to libertarians as, but it's true. All libertarians are feds. They are. And I think I'm going to sell that on a t-shirt. Would you guys buy a t-shirt that says all libertarians are feds? Or that's true. A laugh. It's a laugh to shorten it. But it's very true. All libertarians are feds.
People, I don't. I want to grill. They're the ones that don't want to
They just
grill.
wanted to grill. So if Kyle Rittenhouse is acquitted and he successfully used the Second Amendment to defend himself, doesn't that delete your earlier argument about it being a LARP?
All right, I just
because you were talking about the idea of the Second Amendment conceptually and defending yourself against the mob, and that people use this idea that they've got the AR-15 as like a LARP and it's not real. It's like that they're using that as to sort of like anesthetize themselves against the tyranny that's happening to them every day. If Kyle is acquitted, doesn't that, at this time maybe when it comes out he might have been, doesn't that sort of negate your argument?
I don't think so, because what Kyle was fighting back against was literally an immediate threat right in front of him, which is a manifestation of tyranny. But in terms of tyranny as like a blanket term, like, the government coming down on your businesses saying you can't even leave your house because we're locked down, things like that, that's a much more implicit though present threat of tyranny that I don't believe was enough to wake people up to where they would want to use their Second
Isn't liberal democracy just the mob? I mean, isn't that really
I don't like
what it
liberal
is?
democracy.
That's what I'm saying is that, like, as
so true.
we've created a more socialistic form of government as such as that we have. I mean, isn't like what Nancy Pelosi is doing with the the infrastructure bill in some sense like really just destroying businesses, but just not with fire?
And that's exactly my point, is because it's not the explicit right in your face with a pistol to your head, we haven't been able to react and recognize it as that threat to where we would want to refresh that tree.
But I mean,
and I don't think it will ever reach that point.
I disagree. I mean, you should see what happened in a place like Missouri, for example, when Joe Biden came out with his OSHA mandate, for example, and like our legislature in the state of Missouri immediately reacted. We're calling for a special session immediately, and the governor didn't grant that. However, the legislature will be meeting soon, and I can see that and there were 8 attorneys general in this country who filed lawsuits to fight against that. We have private businesses in this country who are signing on to that lawsuit and are going through using the tools of liberal democracy to fight back. And ultimately, I think that the anti-democratic institutions of the court have always been and will always be and will remain to be the best protection of our individual liberty in the future, which is why, again, it was important to elect Donald Trump. I think we should have reelected him, and it was because of the Supreme Court more than anything.
Maybe we did.
Who are the best protectors of our rights. Yeah, right.
Maybe we did. Who knows?
So
yeah,
that's
who knows?
actually
Is
that's
that what
interesting
they're
because it
doing?
was that use of like legal infrastructure and power that was able to help, and not the
Yes.
Second Amendment in that case.
True.
Because what we tend to see, and this is what I refer to when I talk about these LARPers, is anytime anything bad happens, their immediate instinct is, well, let's do something, and it's like you're not going to do anything. You're just not. And so what actually was effective in that particular case that you mentioned was like mobilizing that political power against our enemies, which is my argument in terms of a way forward as far as the political institutions are concerned. Taking that power back from communists and trying to make sure they can never use it again
Agreed.
to the degree that they have.
Can I say
courts
one
are
last thing here? I'll tell you,
true.
the most effective political activism that I've ever done in terms of using the tools of liberal democracy was in 2009 when Congressman Ron Paul was calling for an audit of the Federal Reserve. And I was working at the Libertarian National Committee at the time. And what we did was we went and
that's true. The courts will never. I mean, realistically, the courts are one of the last things we'll be able to take. I mean, that's not to say we won't have like actual, authentically conservative lawyers and stuff, but I mean, realistically, in order to, people always talk about like, why can't we have base people in the Supreme Court? But understand, like, that so much around that has to happen in order that for it to be a reality, because the way that a justice really kind of works their way up in the system is by kind of pleasing the system, right? It is the judges who please the system who will get promoted to district courts and then federal courts and then Supreme Court, right? And so long as you basically have a legal system in many ways that is like rigged against us, is ran by the current establishment, you will kind of always get justices and judges, at least in the higher courts, that will kind of represent and be effective tools, effective ploys for the system. Because who nominates these judges? Technically, the presidents and stuff like that, but it's not even really that. It's more like a select committee of like bureaucrats who are the most system people you could be, and the majority leader in the Senate and stuff like that, right? And all that. So it's like, realistically, the courts are a cope, and the idea that the courts will be like easily retaken, the idea that it's also kind of a cope. Like, it's just, they're not, though. That's the problem. Very sad.
and we wanted to get this bill passed through Congress, and we went and we had a petition, and we went and we got people who were registered voters in the districts of each of the Congress people, and we got thousands of petitions signed from people who were registered.
And let me just say about the Kyle stuff, like I've been very clear on this. I'm not for defending what he said. All I'm for is for grace, okay? Not to justify what he said. All I'm saying is that, this whole like just going crazy on him, an 18-year-old kid saying a statement that was likely naive, and not defending the statement. All I'm saying is we should show a little bit of grace, a little bit of not tolerance of what he said. I'm not for that, I'm not for tolerance of bad words, bad ideas, but the utterly disavowing of Kyle, like Kyle sold out, whatever. I'm not for that. Not for that.
Voters in their district, and then we walked, us little young Americans. It wasn't Young Americans for Liberty. It was Students for Ron Paul at the time. And me, the Libertarian Party guy, went out there and we organized and we went to those Congress people's doors and we knocked on the door and we came in at the front desk. We said, "Here are the petitions. We want you to, your constituents want you to support the audit of the Federal Reserve." And they didn't have any. The Congress people didn't have any friggin' clue. Yeah. They just knew that these were registered voters in their district. And then what happened? The bill passed the House of Representatives. Now, it was killed by Bernie Sanders, ironically enough, when it came to the Senate. But the fact remains is that boring political activism was effective and is what you're talking about here. But it's one of the things that I see when I was on Capitol Hill. I would see Democratic groups there. And I would see lobbyists there, but I would very rarely did I see
ATF. Probably not.
I can say definitively.
666 Halo.
I don't think there's much.
We don't like that number. This has been another episode of Conserva TMZ, which is basically just right-leaning people talking about right shit, and because it is right, and that's what I want to take away from all this is the right side is called the right because it's correct, and there's a
businessman Elijah Check, centrist Elijah Check. Actually, you guys are both right. It's very funny. There's always he's doing a good job actually, because there always has to be one person in the room at the end of a debate. Well, I think you guys both make good points. That's like that's probably that is very often the role of the mom. I don't know if it's so much that anymore. I know a lot of people actually fight with their moms over politics. Grandmas too. A lot of grandmas and moms themselves are now like very politically convicted in one way or the other. But I would say the role of the traditional American mother is at the Thanksgiving table is when two family members are fighting. I don't know, their son and their uncle, whatever, and they're arguing this Trump this Biden that, and it is the goal. There's the duty. I think it is the duty of the mother at the very end to come in and with the turkey fully cooked and said the turkey is ready, but then also say, I think you guys both make great arguments. I think you both are right. Okay, I think there's truth to both sides, which is not true. This is not true. There is an objective right and there's an objective wrong, but I think that just that statement in itself is kind of the duty of that. I can say my own mother, she has done that in my life. I guess maybe that's where I pick up the connotation from, but I think it's also just kind of genuine. Like that's the role of the traditional American mom in any political debate between family members, at least, to come in at the end and say, I think you guys are both right, like, all the time. But anyways, that's the debate. 3-hour stream, holy cow. We'll go for like 30 minutes. We'll do like a Q&A for like 30 minutes or whatever, because I still have energy. It's early. It's early because we started an hour early, so it's earlier than most of our streams. Which honestly, I'm thinking of starting all of our streams from now on at 8 p.m. Eastern instead of 9 p.m. I feel like it's more prime time. I notice, especially on a lot of weekdays, people are always like, after the first hour, they're always like, "Let's go to bed. I'm gonna go to bed now," and it's like, okay, but the stream's not over. So I've actually been thinking that if we started earlier, well, it'll be better for viewership and whatnot. But I've also been on the flip side, like, is starting at 8 p.m. Eastern too early for people in the Pacific time zone who are all going to be like, just barely getting home or whatever, not even home yet. So there's that trade-off, because back in California, I used to start at 6 p.m. Pacific. We moved here, I just kept the same time for consistency, but I don't know. James Ho says, Vince, are you going to America Fest? I don't know if I'll actually go to America Fest. I will be in town that weekend for other things, okay? For other things. I don't know if I'll go inside America Fest. I hopefully will. Hopefully I'm allowed inside. But I'll be in Phoenix that weekend, okay? So, I don't know. There will be, the reason why, I don't know if we can even disclose this yet, but the reason why is because APU and Republicans for National Renewal likely will be holding a reception like on Sunday the 19th. That's tentative, okay? So don't confirm that. We're kind of like working on it right now, but we'll probably be doing like a little something. It won't be like a full-on APS2, but it'll be nice. It'll be a nice little event. So that's probably what I'll be in town for. And if so, I'll give you guys the details when that becomes a thing. That'll probably be on the 19th. So if you guys want to come, to that, meet some people. I don't know if I can confirm the speakers that we're supposed to be getting, so I'm not going to say that yet. But the two very epic keynote speakers that you come check out. So that's what we'll see. We'll see about that. But I will be in town that weekend, okay? And if that event ends up not happening or whatever it is, then I'll try to arrange a meetup of some type. But I will be in Phoenix that day. So, that weekend, I mean. All right. We make a video bashing anime. I hate anime too. I have Instagram lives talking about it on my members tab. I probably will like later on. I don't know. It's not an important enough political issue for me to talk about in a formal video. But I have done an Instagram live about it before. You can see. I'll probably post it on the members tab or something. It'll be like the freaking thing. Scrappy says, Vince, what do you think about us starting an APU high school group? So this is a question we get a lot, like APU chapters. The thing is, I think, I would like to do it. It's obviously a good idea. The issue is obviously it's like, in order to run a chapter program, you have to have some type of national central infrastructure to do all that. and we don't really have that, at least at this point. It's like, in order to run running chapters nationwide really takes a lot more than you might think it is. And you might think, well, I run it myself, Vince, don't worry about me. It takes more than that. You need regional people, hierarchies, all that stuff, funding for events and whatnot, and we just don't have that right now. We're not there yet, but maybe in like a few years it'll be a thing. Okay. But and listen, if you want to start your own club, I don't know, Bull Moose Party, National Conservatism, like, go for it, and you can post us to speak, we'll come and stuff. But in terms of starting our own actual like chapters with our brand on it, our name on it, I don't think we're ready for that. Maybe we could start a pilot one somewhere, but I feel like overall we're not really ready for that. Jose's like, well, I'll run it myself, Vince. Don't worry. Yeah, but see, even if I trust you, then everyone else is gonna want to run it themselves, and then you're just gonna have a lot of chaos. All right, we are against chaos. We are anti-anarchy, and that's what you're gonna get if you just hand out high school chapters to everyone. You know what I mean? It has to be, like, and unironically, it has to be controlled. Like, we have to actually. Because chapters will some will totally go off the deep end. Some will just not do anything. Some will just do it. You know what I mean? Like, you have to, in order to avoid all of that, you have to have actual like order and command structure and hierarchy and regional people and whatnot, and people to manage the chapter program, and and money to actually like host events and make signs and table and whatnot. And we don't have any of that right now. So that's don't get me wrong, it's a goal we have long term, but I think making student organizations and stuff, it takes a lot more resources than people realize. And people always say, well, I'll just run it myself, just give me the signs or whatever. Okay, but it's more complicated than that. So I would say for now, if you want to do it, infiltrate your college Republicans. And now I don't know so much high school, but like college Republicans, there's a lot of chapters nationwide that are populist, that are right wing, real right wing. There's Bull Moose Party. There's National Conservatism at a few schools. I think that's what we gotta. That's kind of the move in the short term, at least. And just trust the plan. Eventually, there may very well be real chapters. So. JWS says thoughts on Dixieland nationalism. I know a lot of people like to clown on Dixieland because it's where all like the BoomerCon Southern Baptist people come from. But unironically, having now spent quite a decent amount of time, and people are like, "Whoa, North Florida isn't really Dixieland." Okay, well, I've been to Louisiana too. Okay, you're gonna say Louisiana is not Dixieland? Rural Louisiana, not New Orleans, Louisiana. Rural Louisiana, that's not real Dixieland, bro. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Shut up. Okay. With that being said, I think it unfairly gets a bad rap. I do appreciate Dixieland quite a lot. The South is unironically pretty epic. Okay, great food. We're not freezing. Great college football. More religious, way more religious than any other part of America. It's called the Bible Belt for a reason. We like the South. The South is fun. Northeast nationalism is based. Oh, it's -2 degrees. Northeast nationalism is based, bro. -2 degrees. Everyone is depressed and jerks to everyone. And they're living in big crowded cities on top of each other. Yeah, we're based. It's not just incorrect. Incorrect take. Incorrect opinion. Okay, incorrect opinion. Jose says South Florida gang. South Florida, but I will say I think in terms of living, North Florida is probably the way to go overall. South Florida is like where you go for vacation. So Montana is superior. I don't make the rules. No, I like Montana too. Those I don't know what you call. What would you call like Montana, Idaho, Eastern Washington, South Dakota? I don't know what you would call that. I don't know the Yellowstone Federation or something. The Lakota lands. I don't know, but it is unironically good up there. Except during not during this season. Let's see. I spoke there at an event once. What's the temperature in Helena, Montana. Or isn't it pronounced? They're very weird. They pronounce it Helena, don't they, Montana? Or is no? Or I'm no? Or do they pronounce it? I don't know. I know the way I thought it was pronounced is not. Oh, it's only 55. Okay, that is surprising. I expected it to be like -4 degrees. That's not bad. That's actually not. That's not very cold temperature. So, real Chads wear boxers in -10-degree weather. Listen. You're just coping because you're freezing all the time. Oh, the South is cringe. They have country music. Yeah, well, you're literally like just buried up in snow. You know what? When I leave in the morning, I don't have to shovel my car for snow. I just get in and drive the car. You're coping. Grady says Vince was here in April. It literally snowed. Yeah, it did literally snow. It was interesting because it wasn't even like freezing out. It wasn't freezing. That wasn't snow. That was like sleet. That's really what it was. You're just mad you can't make snowmen. You're just mad you can't literally speak. You're just mad you have hypothermia, bro. Okay? MFers be like, yo, Vince, you're so soft. You come from Florida where, it's like it's like 50 degrees in the morning and you're like, oh, this is so cold. Yeah, well, whenever it gets humid outside, you don't know how to act. You're like, oh, I'm so hot. No, okay, so you just leave us alone. Leave us alone. Have you been to Jacksonville? Yes, I have. I've been to Jacksonville. I didn't spend an extended amount of time. I only went to basically the stadium, and I saw part of it. But I don't know. Jacksonville is just. I mean, I don't even think it's a terrible city. It's just kind of whatever. Like there's just nothing there. It's just like, I don't know. It's kind of like if you took Tampa but made it very ugly and just not really much to look at. Because Tampa is a beautiful city. Like, it's just everything's on the water. There's just palm trees everywhere. The bays everywhere. A lot of it looks a very new looking city too. Like, it's not kind of like the trashy city it's kind of made out to be, I think, in many ways, at least anymore. But you kind of take out the nice aspects of Tampa, and you just basically have Jacksonville. That's just kind of like a fairly insignificant place. Have I been to Tallahassee? Yes, I have. I've been there twice now. Once to visit Florida State. Nobody knows what I was doing at Florida State. Only I know. And another time to speak at a rally at the state capitol. And I'm sure I'll be back many more times for many more speeches and stuff at the state capitol. So, Louise says, Vince, aren't bikinis in summer inherently left-wing? Okay, listen here, Louise. Women in the Northeast wear just as much bikinis in the summer, too. Like, I don't want to hear it. Because the Northeast has, like, 80, 90-degree humid summers, too. So, the South, they wear bikinis in the summer. What, they don't in the North? And they don't in the North? What are you talking about? Hose will be hose no matter what the temperature is, okay? I mean, you look up north, you have like this. Actually, no, you know the trend I've been seeing. This is a trend I've been seeing now. I saw it last winter. Because back in California, all the girls from high school, sometimes they go to like, Big Bear and Mammoth and stuff, right, back in California. And so they go to the snow during the winter break. And I started to see a trend last year where high school girls would post, and if high school girls were doing it, I'm sure college girls were doing it for a few years. They would literally wear a bikini. Okay, they really wear a bikini in the snow. Okay, in the snow, and they'd wear a jacket over that, and then they take all their Instagram photos in that. Okay, they take a bunch of pictures wearing that. Which it's so like, and honestly, I'm not saying it's right, but it's like it's one thing to wear a bikini in like actual like sun to actually go swimming in the ocean or a pool. Okay, at least you can kind of. I'm not justifying that. I'm just saying it's an excuse, right? It's another to like literally be wearing it in weather where it's totally inappropriate. Like it's literally there's no like practical function to it. It's not you're not swimming in it. You're literally in the snow. You're literally snowboarding or whatever you're doing. But you literally just wear it. You wear it underneath a snow coat and then you unbutton the snow jacket just to take hoe pictures on Instagram. That is like a new level of just ridiculous. But the point I'm making is that hose will be hose no matter what the temperature is. Okay, so. The idea, the South is less based than the North because in the South they wear less clothes. I don't even think that's really true. I mean, really, it's actually in many ways untrue. Okay, it's in many ways untrue. And really, it's a trade-off too, because the other thing, especially in Florida, is that like when it gets to like 65 degrees, everyone starts putting on jackets. Everyone gets cold. In the north, it's 65 degrees. The girls are still wearing all like, you know, the skanky nothing clothing. So like the idea that like, and then, you know, and also in the north, it's like, you know, oh, well, look at something like Halloween, right? Halloween, where it's like, every girl world's there's a quote from that. What movie is that? Freaking I don't know. It's always, the sound is always on TikTok though. What movie is that? Is it Mean Chicks or something? But the quote about, you know, basically Halloween is like in girl world, it's just the one time of the year to dress as like as slutty as possible or whatever, right? They do that up north too. Okay, they'll still, it doesn't matter if it's 40, 50 degrees during Halloween in New York or whatever the temperature is, they still will wear their lingerie devil costume. Okay, so like the concept that, you know, in the South they dress slutty because it's hotter. I don't really buy that. I don't think that's true at all. I think it's basically the same. I think hoes are hoes no matter where, you know. So. And I don't buy the, like, and really, I mean, are we really to say, and I'm not saying that they don't exist in both places, but, you know, go to New York City, go to rural Louisiana, and I'm not saying either girls are ever perfect, usually, but, you know, just interact with like 20, 30 women, I don't know, take like a sample or whatever, and see which women you prefer to be around. Which ones, okay, again, inner New York City or like, you know, the rural South, ask yourself on average, which girl do you see, and generally you're like, okay, this woman is like less poisoned by Western feminism, and this woman is actually less slutty or whatever it is. Again, not to say that they don't exist in the South, because of course they do. But, you know, it is to say, typically, you're gonna have better luck with like a rural Southern Baptist girl than you will some absolute pierced up e-girl degenerate from New York City. Okay, like, generally you will have better luck, and not always. You know, you definitely, there's a lot of truth to the Southern sorority stereotypes, the SEC sorority stereotypes. Of course there is, but generally speaking, you're gonna have better luck, right? You're gonna have a better average. You're gonna have a better mean rate in the South than you will the North. So that's all to say. Frankly, you people are coping. You Northern nationalists are just the immaculate amount of cope, okay, coming out. The copium that is coming out right now is just you know, off the charts, quite frankly. So, you know. That's my take on it. Okay, that's my take on it. All right. I know a lot of, you see, the other thing too is like a lot of the populist, I mean, I come from California, so I shouldn't really be wanting to talk, but a lot of the populist kind of creators and stuff all come from the Midwest, so there's like a Midwestern nationalism sense of thing, and so because of that, they always tend to hate on the South. They're like, the South is cringe, country music is cringe, Southern girls are cringe, Southern boys are cringe. I disagree. I mean, I honestly disagree, you know, and I've interacted with more of it than they have, probably, right? And honestly, I can honestly say I kind of disagree. So, you know, JWS says, y'all kings get you a small town Southern girl, you won't regret it. I will not say that you won't regret it, because like I said, there still are plenty of like, just, you know, but then I would even say like these sluts, the gen girls, even from small Southern towns, compared to your average one out of like the inner city, like a big city or whatever up north, still the level to which they are bad is still not as terrible as like the ones up north. You know what I mean? Like it's not to say it's good, but it's not as bad still, even so. And so that's what I was saying. I would say you probably have better luck out of that than you would like freaking, you know, some chick from New York or Boston or I don't know, Massachusetts, whatever, Connecticut, whatever. Okay, so that's what I would say about all that stuff. So the South is not cringe. Wisconsin is not the best state. It's just not the case. Okay, it's just not the case. Dude guy says, Vince, which states have historically supported protectionism again? that again, you're coping, okay? Because we're all, let me also point out, we're talking about the modern states of things, okay? We're talking about the modern states, all right? Let me point that out. I know, so in this sense, I don't care what historically it is. I'm just saying now, I'm responding to the argument. I mean, in which states have women historically worn bikinis before like 1960? Nowhere. Okay, nowhere. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're talking about right now. We're talking about right now, okay? So I'm not even hating on Wisconsin. I'm just saying I don't think it's the best state, okay? And I do think the Rust Belt is much better. It's obviously the Rust Belt is has many based aspects to it. I don't hate the Rust Belt. The Northeast, on the other hand, I think that's who we were. Someone came up and said the Northeast was based. Yeah, that's a terrible take. At least nowadays, right? But I don't hate. I think the Rust Belt is one of the better regions of America. I just think that I don't know if Wisconsin is the best state in America. I don't think so. I don't think so. But yeah, I'm gonna stop that tangent. So if you want to talk about anything else, send any other questions or super chats. We'll get off the rivalry of that stuff. Okay, we can start a different fight. We can start a different rivalry. I don't know what it would be, but we need not. What about the West? It depends which West. I mean, the far West, California, Oregon, Washington, nothing needs to be said. But with that being said, I think like states like Arizona, Nevada, Idaho, like that kind of, you could even say it's the Mormon belt, okay, like Utah, like, and not like, because it's where like most of the Mormons live. Those states, they're not so bad. I kind of like them, but So. Video Maker says, what are your thoughts on 2022 New Mexico governor race and Mark Ronchetti? Ronchetti's a former weatherman who is well known in the state and did wellness. Yeah, I don't really know much about this, okay? I see election Twitter always talking about it. I don't bother to talk about it, to look into a lot of those candidates. So I honestly don't know. I don't know. I really know nothing about that race or about him. There's only a few races that I kind of actually take interest in. And maybe I'll take interest in that race when it comes closer, but I don't. I literally know nothing about Mark Ronchetti. I don't know. I'm not an election person. People often forget this, but I don't really know. I don't have a take. Is hunting based? Yeah, hunting's based. I've never been hunting, which I do want to do at some point, but hunting is based. I will say that. Daniel Chang says, "Hot take: Mormons are heretics." No, I don't think that's a hot take, to be honest. Okay, I don't know if Grady's in chat. Okay, sorry, Grady, but it's the official stance of more Christians, right? It's the official stance of Christianity that Okay, but it's true. It's true. Grady says Vince takes interest on multiple races. Oh, really? Well, that's you're very funny. You're very funny, Grady. But yeah. Thompson Spence says Mormons aren't heretics. They're not even Christians. Well, the thing is that like if you're basically proclaiming, but the thing is that they consider themselves. I mean, in a way, you could almost say that any non-Christian is a heretic. I don't know if that's like it classifies the official definition, but the thing is that Mormons do say that they're Christians, right? And they do kind of subscribe to the likeness of Jesus, but they say they believe in the Trinity, but they believe in a different Trinity than we do, right? So stuff like that. So I have nothing against Mormons politically. Okay, I'm gonna say politically they're very based, value wise they're very solid, But when it comes to theology, so I do appreciate them. I don't hate Mormons or anything, I think that Mormons, we have a lot of Mormons in the movement. We do. I think they're not. I don't have anything like politically against them. But I will say that, when it comes to Christian theology, that's where the issue comes in. Rami says, what about Red Lobster nationalism? It's true. It's true. Red Lobster nationalism is literally inevitable. Okay, it is inevitable. The boys are not in a good place right now, but Red Lobster nationalism, it is coming. Only Rami and I know it it means by that. We mean by that, but Zoomer99 says, do you think fraternities are implicitly right wing? I think that the concept of a fraternity is, yeah. I mean, obviously, like, fraternities nowadays, there's still one of the things that, even with all like the nonsense that fraternities do, one thing I will say that they've done a very good job is they still manage to preserve a kind of a sense of like masculinity and obviously fraternal brotherhood that is very lacking in society. And that's just like when you meet like a fraternity guy, and that's not to say that they live a lifestyle that's like good, because obviously there's a lot of drunkenness, there's sometimes drugs, there's definitely a lot of sexual immorality, but you still, even so, which is the case through all of society, so I don't think you can differentiate that as specifically a fraternity problem. Of course it's not, but they do still, however, manage to preserve this kind of semblance of like, I don't know, masculine pride. It's very hard to describe. You kind of know it when you see it, right? And that's not to say, like I said, that their lifestyles are okay, but it is to say that that fraternities have done a decent job even still today of like, because you look at your average like American male and your average like fraternity guy, and you can definitely see a difference, right? You can kind of see like where a fraternity guy is redeemable. And honestly, I feel like almost what we should almost do in a sense with the Zoomers is like channel those types of guys that kind of have like the right instincts, sort of, but they're kind of just kind of being led astray, but they kind of have this redeemable sense of like masculine pride or whatever. I think we should almost like seize that culture. You could say it's barstool conservatism, quote unquote, but it's almost seize that culture and like steer it in the right direction, right? Because I think a fraternity guy is far easier to reach and could actually be a pretty effective member of our coalition, as if you just steer him a little bit better, more so than like obviously like pure stuff, the LGBT caucus or whatever it is. And that's actually unironically what one thing me and like two friends were actually thinking of is like there should be like either Christian or conservative form of Greek life. Like there are obviously like at colleges they have Christian fraternities, but they're the woke, like they're not like, there's not a lot of law. There's just a lot of love and not a lot of law. And it's like Christian fraternity just means like, oh, we don't have alcohol at our parties or whatever, but that's it. But there's not actually like there's not actually really like any real concept of like half, you'll end up like half the people in Christian fraternities and sororities, sometimes more, are just like total liberals, and you ask them what they actually believe about the Bible and Jesus, and it's like literally not Christian, right? So what we've been thinking actually is that what if there should be like some type of like authentic, you could either be labeled Christian or conservative, I don't know, you'd have to figure that out, right? But some type of like form of Greek life that actually like kind of steers people in the right direction, at least more so than like the way we have. So that's what we've been thinking. And you think about, it is unironically a good idea, because think about this too. A lot of schools have there's obviously social fraternities, which is like, I don't know, your alpha, and that's the ones that do all the the stereotypical frat stuff. But there's also like professional fraternities, which are lesser known, but they do exist. Like there's business fraternity, pre-law fraternity, pre-med fraternity, Christian fraternities, sort of stuff like that, right? We should actually have like specifically imagine a conservative political fraternity, because keep in mind that fraternities are not just like party things, whatever. Like people forget that fraternities are also basically used for connections, like connections for life. It's a real thing. You're going to a job interview and it turns out you and this other person were in the same fraternity, and that connection sinks and you land, like that's a real thing. You know what I mean? There's real like fraternities aren't just parties, they're also networks. So imagine if conservative students who eventually will be conservative leaders and politicians and think tank people and whatever, even just regular people, regular private sector people, but are trying to like push along the long march through institutions. Imagine if there was like a nationwide conservative fraternity, basically, you know, fraternal organization where like we could all network and connect that way. Imagine how dangerous that actually would be to the left and the system in a lot of ways. That like, there's not just like, obviously you have like stuff on campus, right? You have like college Republicans, YAF, whatever, right? But those are kind of just like clubs, you know, just kind of like casual clubs people. But imagine if they're actually like, imagine like the actual good it would do for the movement to have like actual like deep-seated like Greek like fraternity organizations that we all basically would use to like, you know, obviously like it's a way to just have friends on campus and stuff too, because obviously like the big problem with conservatives always is like, oh, all my friends are liberal, this school university is full of liberals. Well, okay, on one hand that is nice, and I think honestly a lot of conservative parents who are like always so worried about their kids going to college and becoming liberals, you know, if they're surrounded by like this conservative fraternity, like their whole, and that's their friends and all that stuff, you're like, that influence on them is basically going to keep them in line. So let me just say, I think a lot of parents would actually like the idea of sending their kids into that, but also at the same time, like, you know, obviously, you know, you'll make conservative friends and all that stuff, and you'll form the bonds with like our people, which, you know, obviously is a good thing. And obviously I think actually it gives you a better chance to kind of stay conservative through college if you're hanging around other conservatives all the time. But also further, the more important aspect of it is not just that, it's the connections, the networking, right? The fact that this future generation of like Zoomer conservatives, we all know each other and we all sort of have this connection to each other, and we can kind of mobilize and we can kind of give each other opportunities and get opportunities that way. It's unironically a good idea. So, you know, that is something I would say me and two of the boys have thought of. And let me just say, it's not, I won't give out too many details, but it is actually unironically something that we may start in the future, because we think it's actually a very good idea. It's, you know, like I said, especially not just to have like another conservative group on campus or whatever. It's something that you're talking about permanent networks, right, within the movement and stuff like that. And, you know, I think like a real sense of like conservative, because that's the other thing. It's like conservatives, I think we almost have like this brotherhood in a sense. Like when we see each other, we know each other, like we form immediate bonds because like you're one of me, you know what I mean? So why not have something that's actually close knit, not just like a meeting you go to like every 2 weeks or whatever on like a ballroom on campus? Like why not actually be together? And imagine the chaos we could cause when we're not just isolated pockets on campus. We're actually like one group, and we're all together, and we all plot things together, and we all actually act in unison, and we all actually like brainstorm together. I'm just saying the mobilization and the kind of long-term stuff that could come out of that. It's not a bad idea. It's unironically not a bad idea. Lambda Chi Alpha already started what you're talking about 100 years ago. That just sounds like a regular normal fraternity to me, and so therefore I reject it, and we're going to start our own, okay? Because I've never heard of that, meaning that it's too bad, because we're doing it ourselves, and we will outcompete Lambda Chi Alpha, okay? That's what we will do. APU becoming like Boy Scouts. Do you have a problem with that? Is that an issue to you? Oh, the freaking oh no, you have conservatives all hanging out together. That's what the left fears, actually. In many ways, you know, they like it that, like, on campus, we tend to be kind of isolated from each other. We're just happy to meet, like, oh, I found another conservative in class. I'm so happy. Here's my best friend now. Like, yeah, but there's, like, way more of you that you could organize together. And honestly, I don't know exactly what all of the group would think of, but I just will say that in terms of mobilization, in terms of like being together and having a common purpose, a common goal, I think you could see them be a lot more, a group like that be a lot more effective, not just on campus, but in like long-term career-wise in politics, you know, as compared to like whatever else. So AP youth, that's true. A college for becoming based. That's basically the idea that Liberty or Hillsdale has, Now I don't know if they're always perfect at it, but it's I mean I think it's a good idea. I do like the concept of a school like Liberty, you know. Now obviously you can't you can't send every conservative there because, you know, obviously it's like you have to, you know, you want to spread them out too. You need to be sending them through a lot of institutions, especially like the higher end institutions, obviously stuff too. But it is a good concept, and it's kind of like the now I see us like kind of as being the like Liberty U. Like I'm sure there will be other schools like it, and there have been, but they're kind of like the first significant idea, like the first significant attempt to start that. It's kind of us. That's kind of us with a professional conservative fraternity. I feel like that'd be pretty epic. So, but yes, is a social fraternity. So not well. Yeah, like we want to be, you know, we want to actually have, obviously like every fraternity has to have some social aspect to it, but we don't want to just be that, right? We want to have like kind of like sort of goals in mind, right? Like kind of a political goal in mind, you know. So it's so yeah. I think the way to do it, right? Here's how you do it. You target it mainly at people who want to work in politics or media or something, right? And it's kind of like a way for them to build connections and stuff, and, you know, networks and whatnot, opportunities, and you know, all the professional fraternities do this too. You can also kind of just join it because you're interested in it. Like maybe you want to be something else, because you need conservatives in any field. It just helps. So maybe you don't want to do something in politics, but you just want to like kind of network with conservatives and be around that and whatnot. And you're interested in politics, you know, in like a hobby sense. You can still join and you'll be a part of it. And you know what? Maybe you're an engineer. Well, you know what that means? You're going to make a lot of money. Guess what? Engineer who is in the conservative fraternity just for the social purposes, just to make friends and stuff, and just to have like the brotherhood of the fraternity, whatever. Okay, well, guess what? Now you're gonna be a famous engineer. You're gonna be a big time engineer. You're gonna be a big time doctor. You be doctor? Okay, guess what? You be doctor. That means when you're, you know, very, very rich, then guess what? We're gonna be asking. You're gonna be donating a lot back to the fraternity, aren't you? Oh, see that? See the genius model going on here. See the big brain. It's true. So, you know, I think it's me and the boys. Let me just say, me and the boys think this is a very good idea. Like we think this is a genius idea, and this would be absolutely incredible. And it could be something that, like, you know, definitely does go nationwide. So, I don't know. We've been brainstorming that. Okay, I think it would be quite nice. Okay, I've already adopted the look for it. Okay, you notice. Now I'm not. This is a coincidence, but you notice. Last few weeks, what's the new look, huh? The new Vince look, huh? What is it? The backwards hat. It's coming. The conservative fraternity is coming. It's coming. Okay. Barstool conservatism. It's inevitable. It's coming. All right. Surfing Cowboy says, the problem is that young men are incredibly demoralized. I tried doing a frat with friends, went nowhere. How do you whip young guys into shape? Well, I think that's the thing, is that, like, you know, I think there are people out there that would, like, the fraternity needs to have some type of appeal. I think in terms of like conservatism, I think there's a lot of people out there that would like be interested in it, right? They'd be willing to join it for whatever purpose it is, just finding friends, you know, just kind of wanting to be around like-minded people, or to like genuinely like make networks and whatever. I think that you need that kind of going there, right? And so that's why I think appealing it, branding it as like this is a conservative political fraternity, it would kind of do that, right? And obviously you just need good leadership too. Like I think really branding it to young men, like we are going to save the West through these networks. Slightly exaggerated, sure, but also kind of true to an extent. When you talk about the networks and stuff we're talking about building, and like the reason why it's actually kind of important to have something like this, you know, I think that would work. And also, but I think also, you know, you got to have fun, right? You know, so obviously we don't want to be just literally just volunteering on like campaigns all day long. Like, you know, we will hang out, we will do stuff, right? We'll have fun. But and so I think that's also important, right? Because I tweeted this out the other day too. It's like, you know, in politics, I think especially especially if you're like an internet political person, it's also very important to maintain a healthy social life, because, you know, you go outside, you hang out with people, you know, you'll have you'll basically be, you'll avoid becoming a doomer. You'll avoid that demoralization because you just, but so I think that's important too, but whatever. We will just trust the plan. I will keep them moralized, okay? I'm a great inspirational speaker. They don't call me Chairman Dow for nothing, okay? They don't call me Chairman Dow for nothing. It's true. So, you know. Thomas Spence says, when we make the conservative fraternity, it's a huge success. We will be vindicated. It's so true. If you will take this into account, it's so true. It's literally so true. So, Rami says the problem with a lot of conservatives doing poli-sci are pussy neocons. Well, that's the thing. Initially, all right, let me tell you, Rami. Initially, you let them in. Kind of just if you're kind of just vaguely on our side, let them in. But I think the sort of mission of the fraternity, especially when you understand the institutional march, I think that's kind of a way to really wake people up to the kind of sense of the actual moment of the hour, right? It's not just about low taxes, and when you understand the fraternity itself exists for the by the way, when I mentioned earlier in the stream, I'm always thinking of other institutional kind of ways to march through it. This is one thing I was talking about. I think that realization of what we are doing here, especially something like a conservative fraternity, is kind of hopefully, kind of puts that in your brain a little bit. And I will say, I think that naturally is probably going to attract sort of a diverse array of you'll probably have harder right conservatives and the softies or whatever, but you put them together in the same room. And this is the other thing I will say, considering I would be one of the people in charge of this, I'm going to make sure, unlike a lot of other, campus organizations that are conservative, I'm going to make sure that actually authentic conservative viewpoints won't get censored, or actually, Rami, this applies to you, kicked out of the club or fired or whatever. I literally, considering I'm one of the 3 people in charge of this, I'm literally going to be protecting all of that. And so you just let it seed in, right? You let it kind of the red pill spread, without the gatekeeping. I think it's basically inevitable that it'll spread quite easily, right? It's I think most majority of people ultimately come to take the red pill if they are given it fairly, and it's not gate kept from them. And obviously, it would not be gate kept from them if I was kind of one of the people in charge of this, would I? So the institutional march, it's real. Okay, you literally trust the plan. It's real. All right. Because let me also say that the kind of the group that we are starting with this, I mean, we're all obviously we all identify as conservative, but it's not they're not all like me, right? But and actually I think that's kind of important in a sense, because you need to also be able to appeal, especially when it comes to fundraising and things like that. You need going to be able to appeal to kind of the establishmentarian donors and stuff, right? You know what I'm saying? In terms of starting a national organization that big, that's vaguely conservative Greek life or whatever. But, the fact that our side of the representation through me is already here. Let me just say, the marching through mainstream institutions, it might end up being a real thing, okay? It's very, very true. Very true. So, it's very true. Plan officially trusted. You must do it. Hopefully your long march expertise isn't as bad as your text expertise. Okay, listen here, JWS. Listen here. You're subversive. You're not allowed. You're not allowed in the frat. Okay, you're kicked out of the frat. Oh, just for that. I'm kidding, but it's gonna happen. It's gonna be very epic. Okay. 3.5 hours. What a stream. This mic is turning red already. That's how long we streamed for. So hopefully our audio doesn't die in the middle of stream. I mean, we could change the battery on this, but I feel like you guys would find it funnier if I don't, and it just might. There's like a 10% chance it just gives out on me while I'm talking about this. So, Sushi with a Boss says, "Can we wrap this up? I need to do my homework." Nobody's making you stay. All right. That's your lack of impulse control. That's your lack of self-control, which is actually based in this context because it means you're still watching my stream. So true. We love it. Thank you. But in other ways, I like when you don't have self-control and impulse control or whatever. I don't know, just good time management when it comes to my stuff. But otherwise, get your act together. But you can continue to, do it for me, okay? So, Carter says, Vince, thoughts on the Amish? The Amish theology is very like whack. It's just like, but with that said, I think that they have kind of the right idea when it comes to lifestyle and whatnot. Honestly, obviously I don't think I could ever just leave right now and become an Amish. I'm too drilled into industrial society. And its consequences, quite frankly, but I think that I think it's they have the right idea in mind when it comes to all of that. So they have it's very interesting, right? Obviously, I don't think we can all become Amish. We have to, because it's sort of this. It's the John Doyle take of like, you really can't just live in your own bubble, right? Because they will inevitably come for you. I think that's true. They're not gonna literally will not even let you just go become Amish or whatever, en masse in society. But I think that they have interesting ideas in mind, right? So. Daniel Chang says, hot take, I would be for intervening in the Middle East for reconquering lost Christian lands. Maybe if we actually had Christian governments in the West, but we don't. And so if we were to intervene in the Middle East, it wouldn't be to reconquer Christian lands. It would be to literally just like install like gay democracy. And so it's just like, screw that. You know what I mean? Honestly. So. Let's see. I'll probably end the stream soon. It's a freaking, dude, 3.5 hours. What a stream. I mean, we've streamed for longer, but I feel like we have not streamed for this long in a long time, which is pretty epic. Let's see. Video Maker says, what are your thoughts on futurism? Well, what kind of futurism? I usually see futurism in the context of having an adjective in front of it. And so the fact that it's not means I don't even know what it really means in itself. So Muslims are better than atheists. I think that is true. I would much prefer a Muslim to an atheist for the most part. Actually, I don't know if that's always true, because in many cases it's like, the atheist wants to drown out your voice from the public square. In many cases, and not all cases, but oftentimes, it is the Muslims basically just want to wage war directly against Christians. But in terms of like, I definitely probably agree more with a Muslim on a lot of social values, not obviously religious values, but a lot of social values than I do an atheist liberal, right? And I do disagree with Muslims on some social values. Like, we actually have different tenets in some cases in our religions, but, there is definitely an overlap on a lot of social issues, right? So. All right, should we end the stream here? I think we're going to end the stream here, boys. I don't know. I feel like we talked, I don't even know if we really did a Q&A, but we talked about two very important things. We talked about the conservative fraternity, which is imminent. And we also talked about, what was the other thing we talked about? I already forgot. I just remember what. Oh, the rivalry between regions. That's what we were talking about. But anyways, guys, I will see you guys later. Have a good night. All right. John 3:16. Good night. No, I mean, I'm not Jesus Christ fan. I'm not that a Twitter account. Okay, I'm not gonna steal his thing. I wouldn't steal his. Why would I steal his thing? That's not. I need to come up with my own thing. So I don't know. Luke 10:19. Good night. There you go. There. That's my good night to you. I don't run that account. I don't. And it's just I don't do it. It's not me. No. So, yeah, I'll see you guys later. Have a good night. God bless. Alpha moves only. And peace.
In leaving it, I do so with this prayer. May God's grace be with you in all the days ahead.
He is a globalist, and we are nationalists. He believes in some Pax Universalis. We believe in the old republic. He would put America's wealth and power at the service of some vague new world order. We will put America first. So today we call for a new patriotism, where Americans begin to put the needs of Americans first. For a new nationalism, where in every negotiation, be it arms control or trade, the American side seeks advantage and victory for the United States. And the people of this country need to recapture our capital city of Washington from lobbyists and registered agents of foreign powers who are hired to look out for everybody and everything except the national interest of the United States. And our Western heritage is going to be handed down to future generations and not dumped onto some landfill called multiculturalism.
Oh, you're still here? Well, I mean, you don't have to be here. I'm literally just sitting here reading the Bible. Actually, I'm reading from the book of Job right now. Job 42. Then Job answered the Lord and said, I know that you can do all things and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. It's so true. It's just so true, though. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. So true. Hear and I will speak. I will question you, and you make it known to me. I had heard of you by the hearing of ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. So true. I really do like the book of Job because, you know, the whole often atheist talking point, and you know, this is how you know they never read the Bible. This book almost in a way is one big rebuke of the whole if God is real, why do bad things happen, you know, talking point. Like it's obviously addressed in other parts of the Bible, but the way the book of Job kind of just, you know, stretches that out, and kind of the message of, you know, even in the worst circumstances, why faith in God is important. I love it. And I think, frankly, it would be a very good thing to tweet out on Jesus Christ Fan. Okay, fine, I run Jesus Christ Fan.